My daughter-in-law smashed a cake into my face on my 69th birthday. My son stood there laughing while I hit the floor, bleeding. They called it a joke. They called me a burden. But the next morning when the ER doctor looked at my x-ray, he did not see a clumsy old man. He saw a crime scene, and he reached for the phone to call 911. Before I tell you how I destroyed their lives from a hospital bed, please hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been betrayed by your own blood. I sat at the end of the long marble island in the kitchen that used to be mine. The stone felt like ice under my forearms, seeping through the thin fabric of my sweater. It was my 69th birthday, a day that in any other life might have been filled with warmth and maybe a little gratitude. Instead, the air in the room was so thick with tension it felt like I was breathing in smoke. My son Tyrell was leaning against the stainless steel refrigerator, scrolling through his phone. He did not look at me. He had not looked me in the eye for months, not since he lost his job and pretended he was still going to work every morning while burning through the allowance I secretly provided. Across from him stood Skylar, my daughter-in-law. She was 28 years old, with the kind of beauty that you can buy if you have enough credit cards. She was whispering something to Tyrell, her blue eyes darting in my direction, with a look I knew well. It was the look one gives to a piece of furniture that has outlived its usefulness, a stain on the carpet that refuses to come out. I kept my head down. My hands rested on the counter, trembling slightly. Some of that tremor was real. Parkinson's runs in my family, and at my age the nerves do not fire like they used to. But most of it was a performance, an act I had perfected over the last 6 months. To them I was Jeremiah, the frail, confused old man who shuffled when he walked and spilled his coffee. They did not know they were living with Jeremiah Freeman, the retired chief engineer who had managed multi-million-dollar offshore drilling operations, and who currently owned a real estate portfolio worth $15 million. They saw a liability. I saw enemies. "Happy birthday," Jeb Skylar said. Her voice was flat, devoid of any real emotion. It sounded like she was reading a line from a script she hated. She walked over from the pantry, carrying a large cake box. I felt a small flicker of hope. A foolish, illogical old man, hope. Maybe they had remembered. Maybe despite the snide comments about my limp and the complaints about my medical bills costing them money, they still had a shred of decency. Maybe this was an olive branch. I started to smile. I started to lift my hands to receive the cake to thank them. "Open wide, you old leech," she hissed. The smile died on my lips. The air left the room. Before I could process the venom in her voice, she lunged. She did not place the cake on the table. She swung it. With both hands, she slammed the entire heavy cake directly into my face. The force was shocking. It was not a playful tap. It was a violent shove. My head snapped back with a velocity that my neck could barely withstand. The world spun violently. I lost my balance on the high stool and went down. My forehead cracked against the sharp edge of the granite countertop on my way to the floor. The sound was sickening. A loud, wet thud that echoed in the high-ceiling kitchen. I hit the hardwood floor hard, my hips screaming in protest as bone met wood. For a moment there was only darkness and a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I lay there stunned. I tried to breathe, but my nose and mouth were clogged with thick, sugary frosting. I gasped, inhaling crumbs, choking on the sweetness. Warm liquid began to trickle down my forehead, mixing with the white icing. It tasted metallic and salty. Blood. I wiped my eyes, trying to clear my vision. My nose throbbed with a blinding white-hot pain. I knew instantly it was broken. I had broken bones before on oil rigs in the North Sea, and I knew the specific sharp agony of a fracture. I looked up, expecting to see hands reaching out to help me. I expected to hear Tyrell shouting at his wife, asking if I was okay. I expected shock. I expected regret. Instead, I heard laughter. A deep, cruel belly laugh that rumbled from the chest. I blinked the frosting from my eyelashes and saw my son, my flesh and blood, the boy I had carried on my shoulders when he was tired, the man I had bailed out of debt 3 times. He was holding his phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at my bleeding face. The red record light was on. "Look at him," Tyrell cackled, zooming in. "He looks like a demented clown. This is going viral, babe. You got him good. Look at the way he fell." He was live streaming. He was broadcasting my humiliation to the world. He was inviting strangers to mock the father who had given him everything. I tried to push myself up, but my arms were shaking. Not from weakness, but from a rage so cold it terrified me. The Jeremiah who commanded crews of 200 men wanted to stand up. That Jeremiah wanted to wipe the blood from his face, grab his son by the collar, and throw them both out of the house that had my name on the deed. I wanted to reveal that the frail old man was a lie. But not yet. The trap wasn't ready. The net hadn't closed. So I stayed on the floor. I let my shoulders slump. I let a moan escape my lips, playing the part of the victim perfectly. Skylar stepped over me. She didn't even look at the blood pooling on the floor. She looked at her shoes. "Watch it, you clumsy idiot," she snapped. "You got frosting on my heels. These are designer." She kicked my leg. A sharp, vicious kick to my shin with the point of her shoe. It wasn't an accident. It was a punctuation mark to her sentence. "Get up and clean this mess up. This is my house, and I won't have it looking like a pigsty because you can't sit in a chair properly. My house." The audacity stole the air from my lungs again. This was the house I bought with 40 years of sweat. This was the house where my late wife, Coretta, and I had raised Tyrell. This was the house where I sat alone after Coretta died, promising myself I would not spoil our son. I had failed. I had created a monster, and he had married a demon. To them, I was just a guest who had overstayed his welcome, a squatter in their future inheritance. I mumbled an apology, my voice cracking. "I am sorry, Skylar," I whispered, allowing a tear to mix with the blood on my cheek. I got dizzy. "Pathetic," Tyrell muttered, finally lowering his phone but not offering a hand. "Just go to your room, Dad. You are ruining the vibe. We have friends coming over later and you look disgusting." I grabbed a handful of paper towels from the holder on the lower cabinet and wiped the blood and cake from the floor, my head pounding with every movement. I left a smear of red on the white paper. I pulled myself up using the cabinet for support, groaning as my hip flared with pain. I limped out of the kitchen, leaving them to their laughter. I could hear Skylar complaining about the sticky floor. I could hear Tyrell replaying the video of my fall, laughing at the sound of my head hitting the granite. As I walked down the hallway to the small guest room, they forced me to sleep in the master bedroom was now theirs. I felt a strange clarity. The physical pain in my face was sharp, but the pain in my heart was gone. It had been cauterized. I heard Skylar say, "Hope he doesn't bleed on the sheets." I closed the door and locked it. I walked to the small bathroom attached to the guest room and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection was a horror show. My face was a mask of white sugar and bright red blood. A gash on my forehead was pulsing. My nose was swollen and purple, deviating slightly to the left. My eyes were bloodshot, but behind that damage, the eyes were clear. They were the eyes of a man who had solved engineering problems that others said were impossible. I turned on the faucet and began to wash the sugar away. As the water turned pink in the sink, I made a vow. The love I had held for my son for 32 years died on that kitchen floor. The hope that they would change died with it. Tonight I was bleeding, but tomorrow they would bleed. I dried my face and limped to the bed. My head was throbbing with a rhythm that worried me. I felt nauseous. The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. I knew the signs of a concussion. I knew I needed a doctor. But I also knew that if I asked for help tonight, they would mock me. Or worse, they would finish the job. I sat on the edge of the bed and reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small black notebook. It was the only thing they never checked. In it were the numbers of my offshore accounts, the contact for my lawyer, Mr. Jameson, and the dates of every single time they had abused me. I added today's date, birthday, assault. I lay down, but I did not sleep. The pain in my head grew worse. It felt like a pressure building behind my eyes. I knew then that this wasn't just a cut and a broken nose. Something was wrong inside my skull. I waited in the dark, listening to the sounds of their party starting in the living room. I heard the clinking of glasses. I heard them telling the story of my fall to their friends, painting me as a clumsy fool who ruined the cake. They were celebrating. They were drinking my wine in my house, laughing at my pain. Let them laugh. I closed my eyes and focused on the pain. I needed to remember it. I needed to hold on to it. Because tomorrow, when the sun came up, I would no longer be the victim. I would be the architect of their destruction. And unlike them, I would not miss. The darkness in the guest room was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and spinning. I woke up not because I had slept, but because my body was rejecting consciousness. A wave of nausea so violent it felt like a punch to the gut forced me upright. I barely made it to the small ensuite bathroom before I was retching into the toilet bowl. Nothing came up but bile and the metallic taste of blood that had been dripping down the back of my throat. My head wasn't just throbbing anymore. It felt like someone had driven a railroad spike into my temple and was twisting it. I tried to stand, but the floor tilted beneath my feet. I stumbled, my shoulder slamming against the doorframe. The world was a blur of shadows and pain. I knew this feeling. I had seen men on oil rigs go down with concussions after equipment failures. The confusion, the nausea, the sensitivity to light, even the dim moonlight filtering through the blinds, felt like a strobe light piercing my eyes. This was bad. This was worse than a simple knock on the head. I needed help. As much as I hated to admit it, as much as my pride screamed against it, I needed medical attention, now. If I passed out here, alone in this room, I might never wake up. And if I died here, tonight, they won't just win. They would get everything. The house, the money, the satisfaction of burying the old burden. That thought, that terrifying realization, gave me the strength to move. I crawled to the bedroom door, unable to trust my legs. I unlocked it with trembling fingers and pulled myself into the hallway. The house was quiet now. The party was over. The guests had gone home, leaving behind the sticky residue of their celebration, and the man they had mocked bleeding in the guest room. I dragged myself toward the master bedroom, my bedroom, the one they had claimed 6 months ago because, "You don't need all that space, Dad." The hallway seemed miles long. Every inch of movement sent a fresh wave of agony through my skull. I reached their door and knocked. It was a weak, pathetic sound. I tried again, pounding harder with my fist, my knuckles grazing the wood. "Tyrell," I croaked, my voice a rasp. "Help." Silence. Then, a groan from inside. Footsteps. The door swung open, and Tyrell stood there in his boxers, rubbing his eyes, looking annoyed rather than concerned. "What is it now?" he grumbled, squinting down at me. "It's 3 a.m, Dad. Are you serious?" "Hospital," I gasped, clutching the doorframe for support. "Head. Bad. Need. Ambulance." Before Tyrell could answer, Skylar appeared behind him, wrapping a silk robe around herself. She looked at me not with worry, but with pure disdain. Her eyes scanned my pale face, the fresh blood that had started trickling from my nose again, and the way I was leaning against the wall to stay upright. "An ambulance?" she scoffed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Do you have any idea how much that costs? A ride in an ambulance is like $2,000, Jeremiah. We are not paying $2,000 just because you have a headache." "Skylar," I whispered, the room spinning faster. "Please, something's wrong." "Yeah, something's wrong," she snapped. "You're dramatic. You're always looking for attention. You fell down. It happens. Put some ice on it and go back to bed." "No," I said, the word coming out as a sob. "Tyrell, son, please." Tyrell looked at me, then at Skylar. I saw the hesitation in his eyes. For a split second, I saw the boy I raised, the one who used to cry when I got a paper cut. But then Skylar put a hand on his arm, her nails digging into his skin slightly. "Babe, we can't afford that right now," she said, her voice dropping to a manipulative whisper. "The credit cards are maxed out from the party. If we call 911, they'll bill us. Do you want to pay for that?" Tyrell's face hardened. The boy was gone. The weak man remained. "She's right, Dad," he said, avoiding my gaze. "We can't do an ambulance. It's too expensive." "I'll pay," I tried to say, but the words were slurred. "I have money." "You have your pension," Skylar sneered, "which barely covers the groceries you eat. Look, if you're going to be a baby about it, we'll get you a ride. But not an ambulance." Tyrell pulled out his phone. I watched through a haze of pain as he opened an app. He wasn't calling 911. He wasn't even calling a taxi. "I'm getting you an Uber," he muttered. "It's $20. That's reasonable." "An Uber?" I wheezed. "Tyrell, I can't walk." "The driver will help you," Skylar said dismissively, turning back to the bed. "Just get him out of here, Ty. He's bleeding on the carpet again." Tyrell grabbed my arm, his grip rough and impatient. He didn't help me up gently. He hauled me to my feet, ignoring my groan of pain. He practically dragged me down the hallway, through the living room where half-empty wine glasses and cake plates still littered the tables, and out the front door. The night air was cool, but it didn't help the fire in my head. He propped me up against the porch railing. "Car's 2 minutes away," he said, staring at his phone screen. "It's a Uber X. Don't throw up in it or they'll charge a cleaning fee." "You're not coming?" I asked, looking up at him. My own son. Sending his father, who might be dying, into a stranger's car alone in the middle of the night. "I have work in the morning, Dad," he lied. He hadn't had work in 6 months. "I need sleep. The doctors will take care of you. Just call us when you're done." A silver sedan pulled up to the curb. Tyrell walked me down the steps, opened the back door, and shoved me inside. "County Hospital," he told the driver, a young kid who looked terrified at the sight of my bloodied face. "He's fine, just fell. Go." He slammed the door. As the car pulled away, I looked back. Tyrell was already walking back into the house, checking his phone. He didn't watch me leave. He didn't care if I came back. The ride to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and potholes. Every bump sent a jolt of agony through my skull. I tried to focus on breathing, on staying conscious. I couldn't die in the back of a stranger's Toyota. Not like this. When we arrived at the emergency room entrance, the driver helped me out, looking relieved to be rid of me. I stumbled through the automatic doors, the bright fluorescent lights blinding me. A nurse saw me immediately and rushed over with a wheelchair. I collapsed into it, the world finally going black. I woke up in a room that smelled of antiseptic and cold air. The beeping of a monitor was a steady rhythm next to my head. My head still hurt, but the nausea had subsided slightly. I blinked open my eyes. A man was standing at the foot of my bed, studying a chart. He looked up as I stirred. He was middle-aged, with dark, intelligent eyes, and a serious expression. His badge read, Dr. Gupta. "Mr. Freeman," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You're awake. Good. How is the pain?" "Manageable," I lied, my voice raspy. What happened?" "We did a CT scan and some x-rays," Dr. Gupta said, walking around to the side of the bed. He didn't smile. He didn't offer the usual comforting doctor platitudes. He looked disturbed. "You have a hairline fracture on your frontal bone and a severe concussion. Your nose is broken in 2 places, but that's not what I'm worried about." He walked to the door of the room and closed it. I heard the click of the lock. My instincts, honed from years of navigating corporate sharks and dangerous job sites, went on high alert. Doctors don't lock doors unless they have something to say that shouldn't be heard. Dr. Gupta walked back to the bedside and pulled up a digital image on the monitor next to me. It was a skeletal view of my torso. "Mr. Freeman," he said, pointing to the ribs, "do you see these lines here? On your 4th, 5th, and 6th ribs?" I squinted. I saw faint white lines running across the bones. "Those are healed fractures," he said. "Older ones, maybe 3 or 4 months old. Did you fall recently? Before tonight?" I frowned. I hadn't fallen. I remembered having chest pain a few months ago, a sharp, stabbing ache that lasted for weeks. Tyrell had told me it was just indigestion, or old age aches. I had believed him. "No," I said slowly. "I haven't fallen. And here," Dr. Gupta continued, scrolling down, "your left ulna, another healed fracture, and your collarbone shows signs of a microfracture that calcified poorly." He turned to look at me, his eyes intense. "Mr. Freeman, these aren't injuries from clumsy falls. These are defensive wounds, or the result of sustained, blunt force trauma over time. But even that's not the most alarming part." He pulled a piece of paper from his clipboard. It was a lab report. "We ran a standard toxicology screen because of your disorientation and vomiting. Sometimes head injuries mask other issues. But what we found, it doesn't make sense." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your blood work shows elevated levels of heavy metals, specifically arsenic. The levels are high. Not high enough to kill you instantly, but high enough to cause the tremors you've been experiencing, the confusion, the fatigue. The levels suggest chronic exposure, small doses, over a long period of time." The room went silent. The beeping of the monitor seemed to speed up, matching my heart rate. Arsenic, tremors. The old man shake I thought was Parkinson's. The days I felt too weak to get out of bed. The times Skylar insisted on making me special herbal teas that tasted bitter. "You're saying," I started, my voice trembling. "I'm saying you didn't just fall, Mr. Freeman," Dr. Gupta said, his face grim. "And you aren't just sick, you are being poisoned. Someone is slowly killing you." The realization hit me harder than the cake had, harder than the floor. My son, my daughter-in-law. It wasn't just neglect, it wasn't just greed. It was murder. Slow, calculated, patient murder. They were weakening me, breaking me down, waiting for my heart to give out, or for me to have a fatal accident like falling in the kitchen. Dr. Gupta reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I have a duty to report this," he said, his thumb hovering over the screen. "This is attempted homicide. I'm calling the police right now. We'll get protective services involved. You won't have to go back there." He started to dial. Panic surged through me. Not panic for myself, but panic for the plan that was forming in my fractured mind. If the police arrested them now, what would happen? They'd be charged with assault, maybe neglect. They'd get a lawyer. They'd claim I was senile, that I took the wrong meds, that I fell on my own. They'd get a slap on the wrist. They'd be out on bail in 24 hours. And they'd know I knew. They'd hide the money. They'd destroy the evidence. They'd win. I couldn't let that happen. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they were succeeding. I needed to crush them completely, not just scratch them. I reached out, ignoring the pain in my ribs and my arm, and grabbed Dr. Gupta's wrist. My grip was surprisingly strong. "Wait," I said, my eyes locking onto his. "Mr. Freeman, you are in danger," Dr. Gupta argued, trying to pull away gently. "You can't go back there." "I know," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. "But if you call the police now, they walk away. They claim it was an accident. They claim I'm a confused old man who mixed up his pills. Do you have proof of who gave me the arsenic? Do you have video of them hitting me?" Dr. Gupta hesitated. "No, but the medical evidence is circumstantial," I cut in. "I was an engineer for 40 years, doctor. I know how systems work, and I know how they fail. If we trigger the alarm too early, the rats escape." I took a deep breath, wincing as my ribs protested. "I have a plan, but I need time, and I need your help." Dr. Gupta looked at me, really looked at me. He saw the bruises, the broken nose, the signs of months of abuse. But he also saw the clarity in my eyes. He saw the Jeremiah Freeman who didn't take orders, but gave them. "What are you asking me to do?" he asked slowly, lowering the phone. "I need you to lie," I said. "I need you to create a medical file that says I have severe dementia caused by the head trauma. I need you to tell them that my memory is gone, that I'm confused, compliant, and need a legal guardian. I need them to think I'm a vegetable. You want me to falsify medical records?" Dr. Gupta looked shocked. "That's unethical. It's illegal. It's the only way to catch them," I said. "They want my money. They want my house. If they think I'm mentally gone, they'll get sloppy. They'll make mistakes. They'll sign papers they shouldn't. And when they do, I'll have them." I squeezed his wrist tighter. "Please, doctor. You saved my life tonight by finding this. Now help me save my dignity. Help me get justice. Real justice. Not a plea deal. I want to bury them." Dr. Gupta stared at me for a long moment. He looked at the X-ray on the screen, at the healed fractures that told a story of silent suffering. He looked at the toxicology report. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "If I do this," he said quietly, "and anything happens to you, it's on me." "Nothing will happen," I promised. "I'm not the victim anymore. I'm the hunter." He nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. He put his phone back in his pocket. "Okay," he said. "You have post-traumatic dementia. You are disoriented. You don't know what year it is. You require 24-hour supervision." "Perfect," I whispered, leaning back against the pillows. The pain was still there, but it was different now. It was fuel. "Call them," I said. "Tell them to come pick up their burden. Tell them the good news. Jeremiah is gone. Only the shell is left." Dr. Gupta walked to the door, unlocked it, and looked back at me one last time. "Good luck, Mr. Freeman," he said. "Don't wish me luck," I replied, closing my eyes. "Wish them mercy, because I won't have any." Dr. Gupta stood with his hand hovering over the receiver of the landline on the wall. His knuckles were white. He looked at me with a mixture of professional duty and human pity, the kind of look you give a dog that has been kicked one too many times. He wanted to save me. He wanted to call the police and have a squad car take me to a shelter. He wanted to file the report that would end the immediate physical danger. But he did not understand the war I was fighting. He was thinking like a doctor who sees a wound and wants to stitch it. I was thinking like an engineer who sees a structural failure and knows you cannot patch it with tape. You have to tear the whole rotten foundation down. "Wait," I said again, my voice gaining a steel edge that surprised him. "Put the phone down, doctor." He hesitated. "Mr. Freeman, this is protocol. If I do not report this, I could lose my license. You have arsenic in your blood. You have broken bones. These people are trying to kill you." "Exactly," I replied, pushing myself up in the bed, ignoring the spinning of the room. "They are trying to kill me. And if you call the police right now, what happens? They get arrested for assault, maybe domestic abuse. They post bail by morning. They hire a lawyer who says I am a confused old man who took the wrong supplements and fell down because I am clumsy. They claim the arsenic came from old pipes or contaminated water. Without a video of them poisoning my food or pushing me down that cliff of a kitchen floor, it is my word against theirs. And look at me, doctor. I look like a victim. I look weak. A jury might feel sorry for me, but they will not put my son away for life based on this. Not yet." Dr. Gupta slowly lowered the phone, but he did not hang up. He looked torn. "So what is the alternative?" he asked. "You go back there and let them finish the job." "No," I said. "I go back there and I let them think they have won. I let them think the job is already done." I took a deep breath, fighting the nausea. The pain in my head was a constant rhythmic thudding, but I used it. It kept me sharp. It reminded me of the hatred I needed to fuel this. "If you report this now, they get a slap on the wrist," I continued. "They lose the house, maybe, but they keep their freedom. They go on to find another victim. Maybe they con someone else. I want them in prison, doctor. I want them to rot. I want them to lose everything they thought they were stealing from me. I want to catch them signing the papers. I want to catch them admitting it on tape. I want to catch them in the act of trying to kill a man they think is already brain dead." Dr. Gupta stared at me. He saw the fire in my eyes. He saw that the frail old man was just a costume. "What do you need me to do?" he asked quietly. "I need you to write a discharge report," I said, "but not the real one. I need a report that says the head trauma caused significant cognitive decline. I need you to diagnose me with rapid onset dementia triggered by the concussion. Tell them my short-term memory is gone. Tell them I am confused, docile, and completely dependent. Tell them I have regressed." "You want to play the fool," he realized. "I want to be the Trojan horse," I corrected him. "If they think my mind is gone, they will stop being careful. They will talk freely in front of me. They will leave documents out. They will sign things they should not sign. They will think I am just a piece of furniture, and that is when I will get them." Dr. Gupta looked at the X-ray on the screen again. He looked at the healed fractures on my ribs. He took a long time to answer. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Finally, he turned back to the computer terminal. "I will write the report," he said, his voice low. "I will state that you have suffered traumatic brain injury, resulting in severe cognitive impairment and disorientation. I will recommend 24-hour supervision and power of attorney for your next of kin, due to incapacity. Thank you," I whispered. He typed for a moment, then looked at me. "But Mr. Freeman, you have to be convincing. If they suspect for 1 second that you are lucid, they will kill you that night. They will not hesitate. You are walking back into a cage with 2 tigers." "I know," I said. "I was an engineer for 40 years, doctor. I know how to handle pressure." 2 hours later, Terrell walked into the hospital room. He looked annoyed, not worried. He was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, looking like he had been dragged out of bed, which he had. He did not even look at me. He went straight to the doctor. "So can I take him home?" Terrell asked. "I have things to do today." Dr. Gupta put on a performance that was worthy of an award. He looked grave. He looked at Terrell with a mixture of professional concern and hidden judgment. "Mr. Freeman, your father is medically stable to leave," he said, "but you need to understand that he is not the same man he was yesterday. The blow to the head was severe. It has triggered what we call post-traumatic dementia. He is very confused. He likely will not remember what happened. He may not even know where he is most of the time. He needs constant care. He cannot make decisions for himself anymore." I watched Tyrell's face. I expected him to look upset. I expected him to ask about treatments or recovery times. Instead, I saw a flicker of something that made my stomach turn, relief, and then a small, cold smile that he quickly hid. "So he is like, gone?" Tyrell asked, pointing a thumb at me. "Like cabbage gone." "His cognitive functions are severely impaired," Dr. Gupta confirmed. "He is docile, but vacant." Tyrell turned to look at me then. I was ready. I let my jaw go slack. I unfocused my eyes, staring at a spot on the wall just past his shoulder. I let my hands tremble in my lap. I made myself look small. I made myself look like the burden he always said I was. "Hey, Dad," Tyrell said loudly, as if I were deaf. "You ready to go home?" I blinked slowly and looked at him with zero recognition. "Home," I mumbled, my voice slurring. "Blue. The car is blue." Tyrell let out a short laugh. "Yeah, Dad, the car is blue. Come on." He grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the bed. He did not handle me with care. He handled me like a sack of laundry. He signed the discharge papers without reading them, his hand flying across the page. He was eager. He was practically vibrating with the news. He had just been handed the keys to the kingdom. His father wasn't dead, but he was the next best thing, incapacitated. The ride home was silent. Tyrell played loud rap music, the bass vibrating in my chest, aggravating my headache. He texted with one hand while driving. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window with my mouth slightly open, drooling a little on purpose. I watched the city pass by. I saw the people going to work, living their lives, and I felt a profound sense of isolation. I was a ghost in my own life now. When we pulled into the driveway of my house, my heart rate spiked. This was it, the lion's den. Skylar would be waiting, and she was smarter than Tyrell. She was sharper. If anyone was going to see through my act, it would be her. Tyrell hustled me inside. Skylar was in the kitchen drinking coffee from one of my favorite mugs. She looked up as we entered, her eyes narrowing. "You brought him back," she said, her voice dripping with disgust. "I thought they would keep him for observation." "Better news, babe," Tyrell said, grinning. He tapped his temple. "The doctor says his brain is scrambled eggs, trauma-induced dementia. He doesn't know what day it is. He doesn't even know who I am half the time. He's totally out of it." Skylar put the mug down. She walked over to me and stood right in my face. I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the scent of the cleaning products she used to wipe my blood off the floor. She stared into my eyes, searching for a spark of intelligence, searching for the Jeremiah who used to correct her grammar and ask about her spending. I stared back blankly. I focused on counting the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. I let my left eye twitch. I started to hum a nursery rhyme very quietly and off-key. "Is he faking it?" she asked. "He was fine yesterday." "The doctor said the swelling pressed on his memory center," Tyrell explained, reciting what Gupta had told him. "It is permanent, Skylar. He needs a guardian. That means we control everything. The accounts, the house, the pension. We don't have to wait for him to die. We just have to get power of attorney." Skylar's eyes lit up. Greed is a powerful drug, and I saw it hit her bloodstream instantly. "Really?" she asked. "He is just a vegetable now." "Pretty much," Tyrell said. Skylar looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't hate anymore. It was the look a predator gives a wounded animal. Curiosity mixed with cruelty. "Hey, Jeb," she said, snapping her fingers in front of my face. "Can you hear me, old man?" I did not blink. I looked at her chin. "Hungry," I mumbled. "Soup. Cold." Skylar laughed. It was a cold sound. "Well, this changes everything," she said. "If he is really gone, then we can finally get things moving. But I want to be sure, Ty. I don't want him playing games." She walked back to the kitchen counter. The electric kettle was sitting there, having just boiled for her coffee. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. I saw her hand hover over the kettle. I saw the idea form in her mind. It was a test. A brutal, primitive test. She picked up the kettle. Steam was still rising from the spout. She walked back over to me. "You know, Jeb," she said, her voice sweet and poisonous, "you look thirsty." She stood right in front of me. I was sitting in the wooden chair by the door where Tyrell had deposited me. "Here, let me help you," she said. She tipped the kettle. It wasn't an accident. She didn't trip. She looked me right in the eyes and poured boiling water over my left hand, which was resting on my knee. The pain was instantaneous and blinding. It was like a branding iron searing into my skin. Every nerve ending in my hand screamed. My brain shrieked at me to jump, to scream, to slap her, to do anything. The reflex to pull away was overpowering. It was biological, but I froze. I forced my mind to leave my body. I thought of the oil rig fires I had put out. I thought of the freezing cold of the North Sea. I thought of the hatred I felt for this woman. I used that hatred as a shield. I clamped my jaw shut so tight, my teeth threatened to crack. I did not pull my hand away. I did not scream. I did not even look at the burn. I just sat there, staring blankly ahead while the water blistered my skin and soaked into my trousers. I let out a low, confused moan a few seconds later, as if my brain was taking too long to process the signal. Hot, I mumbled. Wet. I slowly, clumsily wiped the water off my hand, smearing the red, angry skin. I looked at it with mild confusion, like a child who has scraped his knee and doesn't understand why it hurts. Skylar watched me intently. She was looking for the flinch. She was looking for the anger. She was looking for Jeremiah. But all she saw was a confused old man looking at a red hand. She put the kettle down. She looked at Tyrell, who was standing there with his mouth open, shocked by her cruelty, but doing nothing to stop it. "Okay," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "He is gone. The lights are on, but nobody is home. Anyone with a working brain would have punched me." She grabbed a dish towel and threw it at me. It landed on my face. "Clean yourself up, Jeb," she said, "and don't drip on the floor." Tyrell laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but it was a laugh. "You are crazy, babe," he said. "But you are right. He is cooked." "Great," Skylar said, walking past me to the living room. "Call the lawyer, Tyrell. Tell him to bring the paperwork. The house is ours. The money is ours. And the best part is, we don't even have to hide it anymore. He won't remember a thing." I sat there clutching the dish towel to my throbbing, burned hand. The physical pain was excruciating. The skin was already bubbling. But inside I felt a cold, dark triumph. They bought it. They believed the lie. They thought I was broken. They thought I was helpless. Skylar shouted from the other room. "And Ty put him in the basement tonight. I don't want him wandering around upstairs while we celebrate." Celebrate. They were going to celebrate my demise. I slowly wiped the water from my pants. I let a single tear roll down my cheek, not from the pain, but to sell the performance. "You think my brain is broken, Skylar," I thought as I listened to them popping a bottle of champagne in the next room. "You think this is easy now?" I looked at my burned hand. It was a weapon now, a reminder. Enjoy your celebration, I thought, because the man sitting in this chair isn't the father you knew. He is the executioner you invited in, and the trial is just beginning. The morning sun hit the kitchen table, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It should have been a beautiful morning, but inside my house it felt like the inside of a pressure cooker. I sat at the table, my hands resting on my knees, trembling rhythmically. The tremor was part of the act, but the adrenaline fueling it was real. I was waiting. I knew the move they would make next. Dr. Gupta had called Tyrell an hour ago to check in, reinforcing the lie that I was mentally incompetent. Now they would try to lock that incompetence down legally. Tyrell walked into the kitchen, carrying a thick manila envelope. He looked tired, but there was a manic energy in his eyes. He was like a gambler who just put his last chip on the table and is waiting for the wheel to stop spinning. Skylar followed him. She was wearing a silk robe and drinking a green smoothie, looking at me with open contempt. The charade of the loving daughter-in-law was slipping fast. She thought I was too gone to notice. "Morning, Dad." Tyrell said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. "How are you feeling today, champ?" I looked up slowly, blinking, as if processing the question took immense effort. "Tyrell," I mumbled. "Hungry." Yeah, we will get you some food in a minute," Tyrell said, sitting down next to me. He pushed a plate of dry toast toward me, then placed the envelope on the table. "But first, we need to take care of some paperwork. Important stuff, Dad. Adult stuff." He opened the envelope and slid a stack of documents across the marble surface. I recognized them immediately. I had signed thousands of contracts in my career. I knew a power of attorney form when I saw one, and underneath that was a quitclaim deed. They wanted the house, and they wanted the right to sign my name on everything else. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Pictures." "No, Dad, not pictures," Tyrell said, sighing with exaggerated patience. "These are just some forms for the insurance. You know, to help pay for your medicine, and to make sure the house is safe. Remember, the doctor said you get confused. We need to help you manage things. Lies. The house was not in danger. The house was actually held in a revocable living trust I had established 10 years ago, a detail Tyrell had never bothered to learn, because he never listened when I tried to teach him about estate planning. Legally, even if I signed this deed, it would be invalid without the trustee's approval, and I was the trustee. But they didn't know that. They saw a house, and they saw dollar signs. "Sign here," Tyrell said, thrusting a pen into my hand. "Just right here on the line." I took the pen. My hand was shaking violently. I let the tip of the pen hover over the paper. "Medicine?" I asked, looking confused. "For my head." "Yes, for your head," Skylar snapped from the counter. "Just sign the damn paper, Jeremiah. We don't have all day." Her hostility was a gift. I was recording. The pen in my hand was a standard ballpoint, but inside my cardigan pocket, nestled next to a handkerchief, was a high-fidelity digital voice recorder I had bought years ago for board meetings. It had been recording since I walked into the kitchen. I gripped the pen tighter, making my knuckles turn white. I lowered it to the paper. Tyrell held his breath. I could see the greed sweating out of his pores. He was already spending the money. He was already paying off the loan sharks. He was already buying a new car. I started to write, but instead of my signature, I let the tremor take over. The pen skidded across the page, tearing through the paper. Ink bled into a dark, jagged blotch that covered the text of the deed. "Oops," I whispered. "Broken." Tyrell stared at the ruined document. His face turned a shade of red I had rarely seen. "David," he said through gritted teeth, "you ripped it. You have to be careful." "I am sorry," I whined, dropping the pen. "It shakes. The hand shakes." "It is okay," Tyrell said, his voice tight. He pulled another copy from the envelope. He had come prepared. He knew I might mess up. "We have another one. Just hold your hand steady, like this." He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was hard, painful. He forced my hand down to the paper. "Just write your name," he ordered. "J. Freeman. Do it." I looked at him, my son, forcing his father's hand to sign away his own home. The betrayal wasn't fresh anymore, but it still burned. It burned like acid. "I can't," I cried out, pulling my hand back. "It hurts. Tyrell, it hurts." I jerked my arm back violently. The pen flew out of my hand. It spun through the air and landed on Skylar's white silk robe, leaving a long blue streak of ink across her chest. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Skylar looked down at the ink stain. Then she looked at me. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. The mask was gone. The predator was out. "You stupid old useless waste of space," she screamed. She lunged across the kitchen. Before Tyrell could stop her, she slapped me. It wasn't like the cake incident. This was a backhand, hard and fast. Her ring caught my cheek, cutting the skin. My head snapped to the side. The pain was sharp, but the shock was useful. I let out a yelp and cowered, covering my face with my hands, making myself look small and terrified. Skylar Tyrell shouted, standing up. "What are you doing?" "He ruined my robe," she shrieked. "Look at this. This is silk, Tyrell. Do you know how much this costs? He is doing it on purpose. I know he is. He is not doing it on purpose. Look at him," Tyrell yelled back, gesturing to me, cowering in the chair. "His brain is mush, Skylar. He doesn't even know what day it is. You can't hit him." "Why not?" she spat. "Who is going to tell him? He will forget it in 5 minutes. That is what the doctor said, right? Short-term memory loss. He is a vegetable, a punching bag." I peeked through my fingers. I saw Tyrell hesitate. He looked at me, then back at Skylar. He wasn't horrified that she hit me. He was calculating the risk. "Just don't leave marks," Tyrell muttered. "If we have to take him to a lawyer or a notary, we can't have him looking like he was beaten. We need him presentable to sign the papers." Skylar huffed, smoothing her ruined robe. "Fine," she said, "but he signs that paper, now, or he doesn't eat." Tyrell picked up the pen from the floor. He put a third copy of the document in front of me. "Dad, look at me," he said, his voice low and threatening. "No more games. You need to sign this. If you don't, Skylar is going to be very upset. And when Skylar is upset, bad things happen. Do you understand?" I nodded, slowly, tears leaking from my eyes. Real tears of pain from the cut on my cheek, but also tears of performance. "I understand," I whispered, then signed. I took the pen again. I knew I couldn't stall forever. If I didn't sign, they might escalate to something worse than a slap. But I also knew that a signature made under duress, and while medically declared incompetent, was easy to overturn, especially with the audio recording of Skylar hitting me and Tyrell threatening me. I signed. I made it look shaky, barely legible, a scrawl of a man losing his faculties. "Good," Tyrell said, snatching the paper away before the ink was even dry. "See, was that so hard?" He checked the signature, blowing on it. He looked at Skylar and grinned. "We got it," he said. "Power of attorney and the deed transfer. We control the assets." Skylar's anger evaporated, replaced by a cold, triumphant smile. "Finally," she said, "get the laptop. List the house today. I want a for sale sign in the yard by tomorrow morning." "But we have to move," Tyrell said. "Who cares?" she replied. "With the money we will get from this place, we can buy a penthouse downtown. And we can dump him in the cheapest state facility we can find. The one on 4th Street smells like urine, but it is free." Tyrell laughed, a sound that sealed his fate. "Yeah," he said, 4th Street sounds perfect for him." They walked out of the kitchen, leaving me sitting there with a stinging cheek and a piece of dry toast. They thought they had just won the lottery. They thought they had stripped me of my power. I waited until I heard them go upstairs to their room, probably to celebrate, or to start listing my house on Zillow. I reached into my pocket and clicked the stop button on the recorder. I had them. Assault, elder abuse, coercion, fraud. It was all there in high-definition audio. I stood up. My legs were steady. I walked to the sink and washed the small cut on my cheek. It would bruise. Good. Bruises were evidence. I looked out the window at the garden I had planted years ago. Coretta loved those roses. Tyrell and Skylar had let them die, refusing to water them because it was too much work. They wanted to sell my house. They wanted to put me in a state facility that smelled of urine. They wanted to erase 40 years of my life for a quick payout. I went back to the table and ate the dry toast. I needed the energy, because tonight I was going to escalate the war. They had their signature. Now they would get sloppy. I went to the living room where they had left their mail pile. I sorted through it quickly. Past due notices, final warnings, credit card offers. And then I saw it. A letter from a collection agency addressed to Tyrell. I carefully steamed it open over the kettle in the kitchen, just like I had seen in spy movies. It was a demand for payment. $25,000. Gambling debts. So that was it. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. Tyrell was in a hole, and he was using me as the ladder to climb out. I resealed the envelope and put it back. I went down to the basement. They rarely went down there. It was damp and smelled of mold. It was where I kept my old tool chest, the one thing they hadn't tried to sell yet because they didn't know the value of precision German tools. I opened the bottom drawer of the chest. Underneath a pile of wrenches was a burner phone I had bought cash 3 months ago, when I first suspected Tyrell was stealing from my wallet. I turned it on. I dialed a number from memory. "Jameson Law," a voice answered, crisp, professional. "It's Jeremiah," I said quietly. "Mr. Freeman," the lawyer's voice warmed instantly. "We haven't heard from you in weeks. Is everything all right?" "No," I said. "It's begun. They have the POA. They forced me to sign." "I see," Jameson said, his tone shifting to battle mode. "Did you get evidence?" "I have audio of the assault and the coercion. I have medical records of the poisoning thanks to Dr. Gupta, and I have a cut on my face." "Good," Jameson said. "Do you want us to intervene now? We can have the police there in 10 minutes. "Not yet," I said. "They are listing the house. Let them. Let them enter into a contract. Let them commit fraud on a federal level. I want them to try to sell a property that is in a trust. I want them to wire fraud the deposit money." "That is risky, Jeremiah," Jameson warned. "I know, but I want the book thrown at them, Jameson. I don't want them getting probation. I want 10 to 20. "Understood," Jameson said. "We will monitor the listing. As soon as it goes live, we will flag it internally, but we won't take it down. We will let them dig the hole." "One more thing," I said. "Tyrell has gambling debts, big ones. If he gets money, he is going to try to move it fast." "We will watch the accounts," Jameson promised. Stay safe, Jeremiah. If they touch you again... If they touch me again, I said, touching my cheek, it will just be another nail in their coffin. I hung up and hid the phone again. I went back upstairs. I could hear them laughing in the bedroom. They were probably looking at condos online, spending money they didn't have. I sat in the guest room chair and waited. My cheek throbbed. My heart was cold. They had slapped the wrong man. They thought I was a feeble old dog. They forgot that old dogs have the sharpest teeth because they know exactly where to bite. Tonight, Skylar would cook. She would probably try to be nice again to keep me compliant while the house sale went through. She would make soup or tea, and I would be ready. I checked my pocket for the small, empty vial I had swiped from the hospital trash. If she tried to poison me again, I wouldn't just pour it out. I would collect a sample. The game had changed. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about annihilation, and I was just getting started. The air in the house changed after they got my signature. Before, it had been thick with tension and hostility. Now it was filled with a terrifying kind of excitement. It was the energy of a celebration that had started too early. I could hear Tyrell on the phone in the hallway, his voice low but frantic. He was talking to the loan sharks. He was promising them money. He was telling them the house was listed, and the old man was taken care of. He was buying time with my life. I sat in the guest room chair, staring at the wall. My hands still throbbed from the burn, and my cheek ached from the slap, but my mind was racing. I had won a small victory with the recording, but I knew the war was shifting phases. They had the power of attorney. They had the deed transfer, even if it was legally void. They thought they had control. Now they just needed the obstacle removed. They needed the vegetable to stop breathing so they could cash out. The door opened. I didn't flinch. I kept my 1,000-yard stare fixed on the plaster. It was Skylar. She wasn't wearing the ruined silk robe. She was dressed in an apron over her designer jeans. Her hair was tied back. She was smiling. It was the most frightening thing I had seen yet. It wasn't the cold smile of disdain or the cruel smile of triumph. It was a performance smile, a nurse smile. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my skin crawl. "You must be hungry. You barely ate your toast." I turned my head slowly, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Skylar," I mumbled, "hungry." "I made you something special," she said, stepping into the room. She was holding a tray. On it was a steaming bowl of soup and a glass of water. "Homemade chicken soup, just like your mom used to make. It'll make you feel better." Alarm bells rang in my head. Skylar did not cook. In the 3 years she had lived under my roof, I had never seen her boil anything other than water for tea. She ordered sushi. She ordered pizza. She made Tyrell pick up Thai food, but she never cooked. The fact that she was wearing an apron and bringing me homemade soup was a red flag the size of a billboard. She placed the tray on the small bedside table and pulled up a chair. "Come on," she coaxed. "Sit on the bed. I will help you eat." I shuffled over to the bed and sat down, the mattress groaning under my weight. I looked at the soup. It looked normal, chunks of chicken, carrots, celery, but the steam rising from it carried a scent that cut through the savory aroma of the broth. It was faint but distinct, sweet, musky, like marzipan or amaretto, bitter almonds. I froze internally. My engineering background included chemistry. I knew that smell. It wasn't a spice. It wasn't a flavor enhancer. It was the telltale signature of cyanide, or a lethal concentration of certain heavy metal compounds derived from stone fruits. Arsenic usually had a garlic odor, or no odor at all, but cyanide smelled like almonds. They had switched tactics. The slow poisoning with arsenic wasn't fast enough. The loan sharks were calling. They needed me dead tonight. "Smells good," I said, my voice sounding like a child's. "It is delicious," Skylar said, dipping the spoon into the bowl. She stirred it, the metal clinking against the ceramic. "Open up." I looked at the spoon. It was a silver pool of death. If I swallowed that, I wouldn't wake up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had to think fast. If I refused, she would get suspicious. If I refused, she might try to force it down my throat like she threatened with the medicine. I had to make her believe I was eating it. I opened my mouth. She shoved the spoon in. I didn't swallow. I let the hot liquid sit on my tongue. It burned. It tasted wrong, chemical, metallic under the sweetness. I clamped my lips shut and made a swallowing motion with my throat while keeping the liquid pooled in my cheek. I hummed, rubbing my stomach with one hand. Good, see? Skylar said, dipping the spoon again. I told you, it is good for you. She brought the second spoonful. I opened my mouth again. I took it in. Now my mouth was full. I couldn't hold much more. I need to wipe, I mumbled, pointing to my mouth. Drool. Skylar rolled her eyes but grabbed a napkin from the tray. You are such a baby, she muttered. Here. She handed me the napkin. I took it and pressed it to my mouth. I pretended to wipe a mess, but in reality, I spat the mouthful of soup into the thick paper folds. I bunched the napkin up in my hand, hiding the wetness. Messy, I whined. Sorry. Just eat, Skylar snapped, losing patience. I took another spoonful. I needed to get rid of the liquid in my mouth again. I couldn't keep spitting into the same napkin. It would soak through. Look, I said, pointing to the window. Bird. Skylar turned her head instinctively. What bird? She asked. In that split second, I leaned over the side of the bed. There was a large potted fern on the floor, a plant Coretta had loved. It was dying from neglect. I spat the soup into the dry soil. It sank in immediately, leaving only a wet patch that looked like water. When Skylar turned back, I was wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. Gone, I said. Bird gone. You are seeing things, she sighed. Eat. We played this game for 10 minutes. I would take a spoonful, hold it, distract her, or pretend to have a coughing fit, and expel the poison into the napkin or the plant. I managed to swallow a tiny amount, just enough to coat my throat so my breath would smell of it if she checked, but not enough to kill me. The bowl was half empty. Full, I said, pushing the tray away. Tummy hurts. You have to finish it, Skylar said, her eyes hard. It is medicine soup. No, I cried, acting petulant. No more. Sick. I gagged violently, making a retching sound. Skylar jumped back, afraid I would vomit on her clothes again. Fine, she hissed, standing up. Fine. Half is probably enough anyway. She looked at the bowl, then at me. She seemed to be calculating the dose. She probably read online how much was needed. She picked up the tray. Go to sleep, Jeremiah, she said. Long sleep. She walked to the door. Before she left, she turned off the light, leaving me in darkness. Sweet dreams, she whispered. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade down the hallway. I waited until I heard the murmur of their voices in the living room. Then I scrambled out of bed. I rushed to the bathroom and rinsed my mouth out with cold water, scrubbing my tongue with my finger to get every trace of the chemical taste out. I drank water from the tap, desperate to dilute anything that might have trickled down. My hands were shaking. That was too close. They were escalating. They were desperate. I went back to the bedroom and looked at the fern. The soil was damp where I had spat the soup. I needed to get rid of the evidence in the napkins. I shoved the soggy, toxin-filled napkins deep into the bottom of the trash can, covering them with tissues. I sat in the dark, watching the plant. I wondered if the poison would kill it. I wondered if I would be dead by morning if I had swallowed. Hours passed. The house went quiet. They had gone to bed, probably expecting to find a corpse in the guest room come sunrise. I couldn't sleep. I paced the small room, my mind working on the next steps. I needed to get the sample to Jameson. I needed to get out. A noise at the window startled me. It was a soft, scratching sound. I froze. Was someone trying to break in? I crept to the window and peered through the blinds. The guest room was on the ground floor, facing the side yard. There was a cat sitting on the windowsill. It was a scrawny orange tabby, a stray that had been hanging around the neighborhood for years. I used to feed it scraps when Coretta was alive. We called him Rusty. Rusty was pawing at the glass. He looked distressed. His mouth was open, panting. I frowned. Then I looked down. The window box outside the guest room. The fern pot inside sat on a saucer, but earlier in my haste and feigned clumsiness, I had spilled some of the soup not just into the pot, but onto the windowsill when I pretended to cough. The window was old and drafty, and the sill extended outside. Rusty had licked it. He had licked the spilled drops of chicken soup. I watched in horror as the cat convulsed. He let out a silent yowl, his body arching unnaturally. He fell off the sill into the flower bed below. I unlocked the window and slid it up. The cool night air hit my face. I leaned out. Rusty was lying in the dirt. His legs were twitching. Foam was bubbling from his mouth. It wasn't a peaceful death. It was violent and agonizing. Within seconds, he stopped moving. I stared at the small, lifeless body. Tears pricked my eyes. They had killed Rusty. Innocent, hungry Rusty. He had taken the bullet meant for me. But as the grief washed over me, the engineer in me took over. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was forensic evidence. I pulled my burner phone from my pocket. I took a photo of the dead cat. I took a video zooming in on the foam around its mouth. Then I turned back to the room. The bowl of soup was gone. Skylar had taken it, but I had something better. I grabbed the small empty vial I had stolen from the hospital trash. I had kept it in my pocket for this exact moment. I went to the fern. The soil was saturated with the poison. I used a plastic spoon from the bathroom to scoop up a sample of the toxic sludge mud and shoved it into the vial. I capped it tight. Then I went back to the window. I couldn't leave Rusty there. If they saw him, they would know. They would know the poison worked, and they would know I didn't eat it. I climbed out the window, ignoring the pain in my ribs. I picked up the small body. He was still warm. I carried him to the back of the garden where the bushes were thick and hid him under a pile of leaves. "I'm sorry, boy," I whispered. "You saved me. I will make them pay for this." I climbed back into the room and locked the window. I sat on the bed holding the vial of poisoned soil. My hand was trembling, not from age or illness, but from a cold, hard realization. They were done waiting. They were done playing games. They had moved from financial abuse to active, premeditated murder. The almond smell, the speed of the cat's death, it all pointed to a high dose. They wanted it over tonight, and when they walked in tomorrow morning and found me alive, they would be terrified. They would be confused, and confusion leads to mistakes. I looked at the vial in my hand. This was the nail in their coffin. But I needed more. I needed them to think they had succeeded, or I needed them to think they had failed, but try again immediately. I knew what I had to do. I had to up the stakes. I had to force them into the open. I took a deep breath. The smell of bitter almonds still lingered in the room, faint and deadly. "You missed Skylar," I thought. "You missed. And you just gave me the weapon I need to bury you." The silence in the house was heavy and suffocating after the front door slammed shut. I stood by the window in the guest room, watching through the slats of the blinds as Tyrell's car backed out of the driveway. They were laughing. I could see their silhouettes in the front seat. Skylar had her head thrown back, and Tyrell was drumming on the steering wheel. They were going to a bar called the Velvet Lounge downtown. I knew this because Tyrell had been bragging on the phone earlier about reserving a VIP table to celebrate a business breakthrough. The breakthrough was my murder. They thought the poison was already working its way through my system. They thought I was lying in bed slipping into a coma that would end in a convenient heart failure by morning. They were celebrating my death while I was still drawing breath. As soon as the taillights disappeared around the corner, I dropped the act. The tremor in my hands vanished. The stoop in my shoulders straightened. I was not the confused old man named Jeb anymore. I was Jeremiah Freeman, chief engineer, and tonight I was conducting a forensic audit of my own assassination. I went to the kitchen first and drank a glass of water to clear the phantom taste of almonds from my mouth. Then I headed for the basement door. It was locked. A heavy deadbolt they had installed 3 months ago, claiming it was to keep me safe from the dangerous stairs. In reality, it was to keep me away from their war room. They treated the basement like their private bunker, a place where they hatched their schemes and hid their secrets. They thought a lock would stop me. They forgot that I built this house. I knew every beam, every wire, and every hidden spare key. I reached up to the top of the door frame, running my fingers along the dusty ledge until I felt the cold metal of the emergency key I had taped there 15 years ago. Coretta used to tease me about being paranoid. Today that paranoia was my lifeline. I peeled the tape back and slid the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I opened the door, and the smell hit me instantly. Stale beer, damp concrete, and something else, something chemical that made my nose twitch. I descended the stairs silently, my eyes adjusting to the gloom. The basement had been my workshop once, a place of order and precision where I built model ships and fixed appliances. Now it was a chaotic den of vice and conspiracy. Clothes were scattered everywhere. Empty liquor bottles lined the workbench where my tools used to be. A fast food graveyard of wrappers covered the floor. But my eyes were drawn to the corner where Tyrell had set up a makeshift office, A large desk dominated the space, covered in papers and lit by the glow of a laptop that had been left in sleep mode. I walked over to the desk. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a cold, hard anticipation. I sat in Tyrell's chair. It squeaked. I wiggled the mouse, and the screen flared to life. It was password protected, of course. But Tyrell was not a complex man. He was lazy and entitled. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried Skylar's birthday. Incorrect. Then I tried the date of their wedding. The screen unlocked. Predictable. Pathetic. I opened the browser. My breath hitched in my throat as I looked at the open tabs. It was a roadmap to patricide. The first tab was a Wikipedia page on arsenic poisoning symptoms. The second tab was a forum on the dark web titled Untraceable Methods. The third tab was a search query. How long does it take for an elderly person to die from cyanide ingestion? I stared at the words, the white text on the dark background burning into my retinas. It is one thing to suspect your son wants you dead. It is another thing entirely to see the search history where he researched the dosage. He had sat in this chair, probably drinking a beer, and calculated exactly how much poison it would take to stop my heart. He had treated my life like an engineering problem to be solved. I clicked on the history tab. I wanted to go deeper. I needed to know how long this had been going on. The list scrolled back months. Search. Quick cremation services, Atlanta, no autopsy. Search. Life insurance payout timeline for accidental death. Search. How to forge a signature on a deed. Search. Can a person with dementia change their will? Tears pricked my eyes, but I forced them back. This wasn't the time for grief. This was the time for evidence collection. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a high-capacity USB drive I had swiped from the store during my escape earlier that day. I plugged it into the laptop. My hands moved with the speed and precision of a man who had spent 40 years working with data. I didn't just copy the history, I downloaded everything. I copied his email archive. I copied the folder labeled House Sale. I copied the folder labeled Dad. Inside the Dad folder were scanned copies of my bank statements, my social security number, and a draft of a fake obituary. He had already written it. Loving father passed away peacefully in his sleep. The lies were so thick they almost choked me. As the progress bar on the file transfer crawled toward 100%, my eyes wandered to the other side of the desk. There was a stack of burner phones and old devices. Tyrell liked to think of himself as a player, a hustler. He went through phones like he went through money. But one phone stood out. It was a rose gold iPhone with a cracked screen. Skylar's old phone. She had upgraded to the newest model last week using my credit card, of course. I picked it up. It was dead. I looked around for a charger. I found a tangled knot of cables behind the monitor and found a lightning cable. I plugged it in. The Apple logo appeared. I waited, drumming my fingers on the desk, my eyes darting to the basement stairs. If they came home early, if they caught me down here, the game was over. It would become a physical fight, and in my condition, I wasn't sure I could win against two of them. The phone booted up. No passcode. Skylar was arrogant. She thought she was untouchable. She thought no one would ever look. I opened her text messages. The most recent thread was with a contact saved as Real Estate Chad. I tapped it. I started reading from the bottom up. The timestamp on the last message was from 2 hours ago, right before they left for the bar. Skylar, we are celebrating tonight, babe. The old leech finally signed the papers. Tyrell thinks he won, but we are the ones cashing out. Chad, that is amazing, baby. When is the funeral? Skylar, soon. Tonight if we are lucky. I gave him the special soup. He should be cold by morning. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the poison. She was discussing my murder with her lover, like they were planning a weekend getaway. But as I scrolled up, the betrayal deepened. It twisted into something even more grotesque. Skylar, 2 days ago. Tyrell is such an idiot. He thinks we are going to invest the money in his stupid crypto scheme. As soon as the wire hits your account, I am filing for divorce. I am taking half plus the house money, and we are going to Cabo. Chad, you are bad. I love it. Does he suspect anything? Skylar, please. He is too busy trying to be a gangster. He worships me. He will sign whatever I put in front of him, just like his dad. I will leave him with the debt and the body. We will be gone before the autopsy report comes back. I sat back in the chair, stunned. Tyrell wasn't the mastermind. He was the weapon. Skylar was the hand aiming it. My son was going to kill his father, commit the ultimate sin, and for what? To be left penniless and alone while his wife ran off with the real estate agent who was helping them sell my house. Tyrell was a murderer, yes, but he was also a fool, a useful idiot, a cuckold who was digging 2 graves without realizing one was for himself. I felt a strange pang of pity mixed with the hatred. My son was so desperate for approval, so desperate to be a big shot that he had let this woman manipulate him into destroying his own bloodline. He was willing to kill the only person who had ever actually loved him for a woman who was laughing at him behind his back. I looked at the phone again. There were photos too. Explicit photos sent between Skylar and Chad. Photos taken in my house, in my bed. While I was sleeping in the guest room, they were defiling my home. I connected the phone to the laptop. I transferred everything. The texts, the photos, the call logs. This was the nuclear option. This was the evidence that would not only send them to prison, but would turn them against each other before the handcuffs even clicked. When Tyrell saw this, when he realized he had sold his soul for a lie, he would break. He would testify against her to save himself. The transfer finished. I pulled the USB drive and put it in my pocket. I wiped my fingerprints from the laptop and the phone. I unplugged the charger and tossed the cable back into the tangle. I made sure the chair was pushed in exactly as I found it. I stood up and looked around the basement one last time. This place where I had taught Tyrell how to use a hammer, how to measure twice and cut once. I had failed him. I had failed to teach him character. I had failed to teach him how to spot a snake. I walked to the stairs. My leg brushed against a loose floorboard near the water heater. I paused. I remembered something. Years ago, I had hidden a small fireproof safe under the floorboards there. It contained emergency cash and gold coins, a prep for a rainy day. I knelt down and pried the board up. The safe was gone. There was only a hole and an empty wrapper for a pawn shop. Tyrell had found it. He had stolen my rainy day fund probably months ago. That was where the money for the party came from. That was how he bought Skylar the new phone. He had stripped the house bare. He had hollowed out my life from the inside out. I replaced the board. I didn't need the gold. I had something more valuable in my pocket. I had the truth. I climbed the stairs, locking the door behind me and placing the key back on the ledge. I walked through the dark house, past the photos of a happy family that no longer existed. I went back to the guest room. I lay down on the bed, fully clothed. I checked the time. They would be back soon, drunk and loud, expecting to find a dead body. Instead, they would find a sleeping vegetable. I closed my eyes, but my mind was sharp. I visualized the chessboard. I saw the pieces moving. Skylar was the queen, aggressive and deadly. Tyrell was a pawn, thinking he was a king. And I was the player they forgot was even in the game. I touched the USB drive in my pocket. It felt warm. Come home, children, I thought. Come home and see what your father has found. I heard a car door slam outside, stumbling footsteps on the porch, the key scratching at the lock. They were back. The show was about to resume, but now I knew the ending, and it wasn't the one they wrote. The bathroom window was small and high up on the wall. It was designed to let out steam, not to let out a full-grown man, but it was my only exit point that didn't have a squeaky hinge or a direct line of sight to the living room where Tyrell and Skylar were currently arguing about money. I locked the bathroom door from the inside and turned on the shower. The sound of the running water was my cover. To them, it would sound like the old man was finally washing off the grime of the day. In reality, it was the countdown clock for my escape. I climbed onto the toilet seat, my ribs protesting with a sharp stab of pain. I ignored it. Pain was just information, and right now, the information was that I was alive and moving. I unlatched the window. It slid up silently thanks to the maintenance I had done years ago. I pulled myself up and squeezed through the opening. The night air hit my face cool and damp. I dropped into the flower bed below, landing in the soft mulch. I froze, waiting for a shout or a light to flick on. Nothing. Just the sound of the shower hissing inside and the distant hum of traffic. I stood up and brushed the dirt off my clothes. I was wearing my old gardening jacket over my pajamas. If anyone saw me, I would just look like a confused senior citizen wandering the property. That was the beauty of their lie. It gave me the perfect alibi. If Tyrell caught me, I would just mumble about looking for my wife, Coretta. He would drag me back inside, annoyed but unsuspecting. But tonight, I had a destination. I walked to the back of the property, where the fence was low. I hopped over it with a surprising amount of agility. Adrenaline is a powerful drug. I moved through the neighbor's yard, keeping to the shadows, until I reached the street behind our subdivision. I walked for 3 blocks, keeping my head down, shuffling my feet whenever a car passed. I had to maintain the character just in case. My destination was an abandoned parking lot behind the old strip mall on Elm Street. It was a place teenagers used to go to smoke, and where raccoons fought over dumpster scraps. It was desolate, dark, and perfect. I waited in the shadow of a rusted dumpster. 5 minutes later, a pair of headlights swept across the cracked asphalt. A car pulled in slowly. It wasn't a nondescript sedan. It was a sleek black Bentley Continental. The paint was so dark, it looked like a hole in the night. It was a display of wealth that looked completely out of place in this rundown lot. It was a risk, but Jameson always said that if you look like you own the place, nobody questions you. The car stopped. The engine purred, then died. The driver's door opened, and Arthur Jameson stepped out. He was a tall man in his 60s, wearing a suit that cost more than Tyrell's car. He looked around, his eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. He spotted me and nodded. I stepped out of the shadows. "Mr. Freeman Jameson," said his voice low and cultured. "You look terrible." "I feel terrible, Arthur," I replied, walking over to him. "But I am still standing." Jameson opened the back door of the Bentley. We sat inside. The interior smelled of rich leather and expensive cologne. It was a stark contrast to the smell of mildew and stale beer in my own basement. It felt like stepping back into my real life. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Ziploc bag containing the USB drive and the vial of poisoned soil. I placed them on the leather center console. "Here it is," I said, "the digital footprint. Tyrell's search history for poisons. Skylar's text to her lover about selling the house and divorcing Tyrell. The photos. The audio of them planning to drive me insane." Jameson looked at the bag as if it contained radioactive material. "And the vial?" he asked, pointing to the container with the dirt. "Soil sample," I explained. "Skylar tried to feed me soup tonight. It smelled like bitter almonds, cyanide, or a heavy concentration of fruit pit toxin. I didn't eat it, but the cat did. The cat died in seconds. This dirt is from the plant pot where I spit the rest." Jameson's jaw tightened. He picked up the bag carefully. "This is it, Jeremiah," he said. "We have enough. Attempted murder, conspiracy, elder abuse. I can have the police at your door in 20 minutes. We can end this tonight." "No," I said firmly. "Not yet." Jameson looked at me surprised. "Why not?" he asked. "They are escalating. Cyanide isn't a game. If you slip up, if you actually swallow it, you are dead before you hit the floor." "I know the risks," I said. "But if we arrest them now, they will fight it. They will say the search history was just curiosity. They will say the texts were jokes. They will claim the soil sample was contaminated by me to frame them. They have a good lawyer, Arthur. I paid for his retainer years ago when Tyrell got his DUI. He is a shark. He will create doubt." "So what is the end game?" Jameson asked. "I want them to execute the sale," I said. "I want them to sign the papers with the loan sharks. I want them to commit the fraud fully. I want there to be no doubt that they stole the house and the money." Jameson sighed and reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a thick file folder. "That brings me to the bad news," he said. I braced myself. "What is it?" "I froze the accounts you told me to," Jameson said. "The offshore funds, the investment portfolio, the main savings. They can't touch a dime of your real wealth. When Tyrell tried to access the main checking account today using the forged power of attorney, the bank flagged it just as we planned. He was denied." "Good," I said. "That will make him desperate." "It did make him desperate," Jameson said grimly. "Too desperate. After the bank turned him away, he didn't go home. My investigator followed him. He went to a pawn shop in the bad part of town, the one run by the Ivanov brothers. I knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the Ivanovs. They were not pawnbrokers. They were loan sharks who laundered money through a storefront. Tyrell took out a hard money loan," Jameson continued. "A bridge loan. He used the house as collateral." I stared at him. He mortgaged the house. My house. He forged your signature on a quitclaim deed, transferring the title to himself temporarily, Jameson explained. It is a crude forgery, and it won't stand up in court eventually. But for the Ivanovs, it was enough. They don't care about legal niceties. They care about the asset. They gave him $50,000 in cash this afternoon. The interest rate is predatory. If he doesn't pay it back in 30 days, they take the house. Or they take his knees. I sat back in the soft leather seat. $50,000. That was the price of my life. My son had sold my home to Russian mobsters for $50,000 just to pay off his gambling debts and buy Skylar more jewelry. He has crossed the line, I whispered. There is no coming back from this. He has invited wolves into the sheep pen. We can stop the transaction, Jameson said. I can file an emergency injunction tomorrow morning. We can prove the deed is fake. We can block the Ivanovs. No, I said instantly. My voice was cold even to my own ears. Jeremiah Jameson warned. These are dangerous men. If Tyrell defaults, they won't just foreclose. They will come to the house. They will come for you. Let them, I said. Let him take the money. Let him spend it. Let him dig the hole so deep he can never climb out. But the house, Jameson argued. It is your home, Coretta's home. It is just wood and brick, Arthur, I said. My home died when my wife did. This house has become a prison. If burning it down is what it takes to purify it, then let it burn. I looked Jameson in the eye. Don't block the loan. Let the check clear. Let Tyrell feel rich for a few days. Let Skylar think she won. Because when the police come, and they will come, I want Tyrell to not only be facing murder charges, I want him to be facing the Russian mob with empty pockets. I want him to know true fear. Jameson stared at me for a long moment. He saw the resolve in my face. He nodded slowly, closing the file. You are a ruthless man, Jeremiah Freeman, he said softly. I am glad I am on your side. I have to be, I said. They made me this way. Jameson reached into his briefcase again. If we are doing this, you need protection, he said. He pulled out 2 items. The first was a small glass vial with a dropper. It contained a clear liquid. This is a broad-spectrum chelating agent and a specific antidote for cyanide ingestion, Jameson explained. It is not a magic bullet. If you drink a full cup of poison, this won't save you. But if you ingest a small amount like you did with the soup, this will neutralize it in your stomach before it absorbs. Take a dose before you eat or drink anything they give you. It will buy you time. I took the vial. It felt heavy in my hand. A lifeline. And this, Jameson said, handing me a small black disc about the size of a quarter. This is a military-grade GPS tracker. It has a battery life of 2 weeks. It connects directly to my private server. What is this for? I asked. If the poison works, Jameson said, his voice grave, or if they think it worked, they will need to move the body. They won't call the coroner, not with the arsenic in your system. They will try to dispose of you. A chill ran down my spine. He was right. If I played dead successfully, they would have to get rid of me. Keep this on you at all times, Jameson said. Sew it into your clothes. Swallow it if you have to. If your heart rate monitor on your watch stops, or if you leave the perimeter of the house without authorization, my security team hits the location in 5 minutes. I nodded. I understood. We were entering the final act, the part where the victim plays dead to catch the killer. I put the tracker in my pocket next to the antidote. Thank you, Arthur, I said. You have thought of everything. I am just the lawyer, Jameson said with a sad smile. You are the one in the trenches. I opened the door of the Bentley. The cool air rushed in, breaking the bubble of luxury. One more thing, Jeremiah Jameson said before I got out. Tyrell is desperate. He has 50 grand in cash now. That makes him confident. But when that runs out, or when Skylar demands more, he will get sloppy. He will try to finish this quickly. Be ready. I am ready, I said. I stepped out into the dark parking lot. The Bentley pulled away silently, disappearing into the night like a phantom. I was alone again, just an old man in pajamas standing in a desolate lot. I walked back to the house. The journey felt longer this time. The weight of what I had just done pressed on me. I had authorized my son to sell my soul to the devil. I had armed myself for a death match with my own family. When I reached the backyard of my house, I saw the lights were still on in the kitchen. I could see shadows moving, Tyrell and Skylar. They were drinking. celebrating the $50,000, celebrating the fact that the old man was asleep and hopefully dying in the guest room. I climbed back through the bathroom window, my joints aching. I landed on the tile floor and locked the window. I turned off the shower, which had been running for an hour. I dried my hair with a towel to make it look like I had washed. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were tired but clear. I took the GPS tracker and slipped it into the lining of my slipper, sewing the small tear shut with a needle and thread from the emergency kit under the sink. They might strip me, they might change my clothes, but they probably wouldn't check my old orthopedic slippers. I took a dropper full of the antidote. It tasted bitter like metal. Then I unlocked the bathroom door and shuffled out into the hallway. I heard Terrell's voice from the kitchen. It was loud, booming with false bravado. "We are rich, baby," he was shouting. "50K cash, and that is just the advance. Once the old man kicks it, we get the rest. We are going to live like kings." I stood in the shadows, listening. Kings, I thought. You are not a king, Terrell. You are a peasant who just sold his castle for a handful of copper. I walked back to the guest room and lay down on the bed. I stared at the ceiling of the house that now belonged to the Russian mob. Let them celebrate. Let them drink. Let them think they have won. Because tomorrow, I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. I was going to die, or at least I was going to give the performance of a lifetime. I closed my eyes and waited for the dawn. The final act was about to begin. The noise started around 7 in the evening. It wasn't the polite murmur of a dinner party or the cheerful sounds of a family gathering. It was the raucous, chaotic thumping of bass-heavy music and the loud, performative laughter of people who are trying too hard to have a good time. Tyrell had invited his crew over. These weren't friends in the true sense of the word. They were leeches, hanger-ons, and low-level hustlers who smelled the fresh cash Tyrell had gotten from the loan sharks and swarmed like flies to a carcass. I lay on the bed in the guest room, listening to the floorboards creak above me and the walls vibrate. I hadn't eaten since the poisoned soup incident the night before. My stomach was a hollow knot of hunger, but my resolve was harder than granite. I checked the time on my watch. I had taken the antidote Jameson gave me an hour ago, just in case. I was ready for whatever twisted game they wanted to play. The door to my room flew open. It didn't just open, it slammed against the wall with a violence that was meant to startle. Tyrell stood there, swaying slightly, a red plastic cup in his hand. He was wearing a new gold chain that probably cost 2 mortgage payments. His eyes were glassy, and his grin was lopsided. "Get up, old man," he shouted over the music. "We have guests. You need to come say hello." I sat up slowly, feigning the confusion that was my armor. "Guests," I mumbled, blinking against the hallway light. "Who?" "My boys," Tyrell said. "The real ones. They want to meet the famous Jeremiah Freeman, the big-shot engineer. Come on, move your ass." He didn't wait for me to stand. He grabbed the collar of my pajama shirt and hauled me up. I stumbled, letting my legs drag a bit, making him carry my weight. He cursed under his breath, calling me dead weight, but he dragged me out into the living room anyway. The scene that greeted me broke my heart in a new way. My living room, the room where Coretta and I had spent quiet evenings reading and listening to jazz, had been turned into a fraternity house. There were 6 or 7 men lounging on my Italian leather sofas, their feet up on the coffee table. Smoke, thick and pungent, hung in the air. It wasn't just cigarettes, it was weed. They were ashing on the floor on the expensive Persian rug I had bought in Dubai 20 years ago. "Look who decided to join the land of the living," Tyrell announced, shoving me into the center of the room. The music lowered slightly. The men looked at me. Their eyes were bloodshot and mocking. They didn't see a man, they saw a prop, a joke. "This is him," one of the men asked a guy with a neck tattoo and a flat-brimmed hat. "The genius." Tyrell laughed, wrapping an arm around my shoulder that felt more like a chokehold. "Yeah, this is him," Tyrell said, squeezing me tight. "The great Jeremiah Freeman. Used to run oil rigs. Used to boss around hundreds of men. Used to be the man." He paused for effect, looking around at his friends to make sure he had their attention. "And now, look at him. He can't even feed himself. He pisses himself when he sleeps. He is basically a giant baby." The room erupted in laughter. It was a cruel, sharp sound. I stood there, head bowed, letting my shoulders slump. Inside, I was screaming. I was raging against the disrespect, against the sheer ingratitude. I had wiped this boy's bottom. I had paid for his tuition. I had bought him his first car, and now he was parading me around like a circus freak to impress a bunch of nobodies. He thinks he is still the boss. Tyrell continued poking me in the chest. He tries to tell me what to do with the house. My house. Can you believe that? You should put him in a home, man, the guy with the neck tattoo said, taking a swig of beer. My grandma got like that. We put her in a place upstate. Never heard from her again. We are working on it, Tyrell said, winking. But for now, he is useful. He is good for entertainment. Just then, Skylar walked in from the kitchen. She was carrying a tray of shots. She wore a tight dress that looked expensive, probably bought with the credit card she stole from me. When she saw me, her eyes lit up with a malicious glee. She put the tray down and clapped her hands. "Oh, good, you brought him out," she said. "I have the perfect thing. Wait right there." She ran back into the kitchen. The men watched her go whistling and making comments that no husband should tolerate, but Tyrell just grinned proud to possess something others wanted. She came back a moment later, holding something in her hand. It was a piece of cardboard, crumpled and stained. It took me a second to recognize it. It was the birthday hat, the paper cone hat from my birthday 2 days ago, the one I was wearing when she smashed the cake into my face. It was torn at the rim and still had dried, crusty frosting stuck to the side. It looked like trash. It was trash. She walked up to me and jammed it onto my head. The elastic string snapped under my chin, digging into the loose skin of my neck. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "Now he is dressed for the party. The birthday boy." The room exploded again. Phones came out. Flashes went off. I was blinded by the light of a dozen cameras capturing my shame. "He needs a job," Skylar announced. "He can't just stand there taking up space." Ty, give him the beer. Tyrell grabbed a pitcher of cheap domestic beer from the side table and a stack of red plastic cups. He shoved them into my hands. "You are the bartender tonight, Dad," he said. "Go around, fill everyone up, and don't spill a drop, or you are sleeping outside with the dog." I didn't have a dog anymore. They had killed the cat. The threat was empty, but the malice was real. I took the pitcher. It was heavy. My hands were shaking, partly from the act and partly from the sheer effort of not smashing the glass pitcher into Tyrell's face. I shuffled toward the first man on the sofa. I poured. A little spilled over the rim. The man cursed and wiped it on his pants, but he laughed. "Good job, Grandpa," he sneered. "Keep it coming." I moved to the next man, then the next. I was a ghost in my own home, serving drinks to the invaders, wearing a garbage hat while my son watched with glee. I felt like Lear. I felt like a king reduced to a fool. I reached the guy with the neck tattoo. He was sitting on the love seat, his legs stretched out into the walkway. He was looking at me with a smirk that told me he was planning something. "Fill it up, old-timer," he said, holding out his cup. I leaned forward to pour. At the last second, just as I was tilting the pitcher, he shot his leg out. He hooked his foot behind my ankle and yanked. It wasn't a stumble, it was a hard fall. My bad hip, the one I had hurt on the kitchen floor, gave way instantly. I went down like a tree. The pitcher flew from my hand. It shattered against the coffee table, sending shards of glass and gallons of beer exploding across the room. I hit the floor hard, my shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. The breath was knocked out of me. I lay there in a puddle of foaming beer and broken glass, my ribs screaming in agony, the birthday hat askew on my head. For a second, there was silence. Then the laughter started. It wasn't just laughter. It was howling. It was hooting. They were slapping their knees. They were high-fiving the guy who tripped me. "That was classic, man," Tyrell shouted. "Did you see him go down? Like a sack of potatoes. Clean up on aisle 4, Skylar yelled, laughing so hard she spilled her own drink. I lay there on the wet Persian rug, the beer soaking into my clothes, stinging the cuts on my face. I didn't try to get up immediately. I couldn't. The pain was too great. I slowly lifted my head. I looked through the forest of legs, through the haze of smoke, and found him. I found Tyrell. He was standing by the fireplace, a drink in one hand, his phone in the other. He was laughing. His mouth was open, his head thrown back. He wasn't checking to see if I was hurt. He wasn't angry at his friend for assaulting his father. He was enjoying it. He was reveling in it. I locked my eyes on his. I stared at him with an intensity that should have burned a hole through his soul. I wanted him to look at me. I wanted him to see the man who raised him, lying in the dirt. I wanted to give him one last chance, One final moment to remember who he was, to remember the baseball games, the fishing trips, the nights I sat up with him when he had a fever. I willed him to look at me, to feel shame, to help me up. Tyrell's laughter subsided slightly. He felt my gaze. He lowered his head and looked at me. Our eyes met. For a heartbeat I saw it. I saw the recognition. He knew I was hurt. He knew this was wrong. He knew he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But then he blinked. The moment passed. He looked away. He deliberately turned his head toward the guy with the neck tattoo. He raised his glass in a toast. To gravity, he shouted. And he drank. He drank the cheap beer while his father lay in broken glass. That was the moment. That was the death of my son. The biological entity named Tyrell Freeman still existed, but the son I loved, the boy I had hope for, died in that living room. He didn't just fail to help me. He chose the mob over me. He chose the cruelty over the connection. His cowardice was bottomless. He was not a man. He was a husk filled with greed and fear. Skylar clapped her hands, cutting through the noise. "Okay, show is over," she announced, her voice sharp. "He made a mess. Again. I am sick of this." She walked over to me. She grabbed my arm, not to help me up, but to drag me. "Get up," she hissed. I struggled to my knees, slipping on the beer. I felt a shard of glass cut into my palm, but I didn't cry out. I stood up, swaying. "You are disgusting," she said, wrinkling her nose at the smell of beer on me. "You ruined the party. You ruined the rug. I am done with you for tonight." She grabbed me by the back of my pajama shirt and pushed me towards the hallway. "Not the guest room," she said to Tyrell. "He will just mess up the sheets. Put him in the storage room." The storage room. It was a small, windowless closet off the laundry room. It was unheated. It had a concrete floor and shelves full of cleaning supplies. It was where we kept the vacuum cleaner and the winter coats. Tyrell didn't argue. He didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, good idea," he said. "Let him dry out." He grabbed my other arm. Together they marched me down the hall, away from the party, away from the light. The music faded behind us, but the laughter followed me like a ghost. They opened the storage room door. It was pitch black inside. "Get in," Skylar said, shoving me. I stumbled into the darkness. I tripped over a box of detergent and fell against the cold concrete wall. "And don't think you are getting dinner," she added. "You lost your eating privileges when you broke my pitcher." She slammed the door. I heard the lock click. I was alone in the dark. The air was cold and smelled of bleach. I could hear the muffled bass of the music through the walls. I sat down on the hard floor, hugging my knees to my chest to keep warm. My clothes were wet and sticky. My hand was bleeding. My head was spinning, but my mind was crystal clear. I sat there in the cold and I didn't cry. I didn't despair. I closed my eyes and I visualized the plan. They had humiliated me. They had physically assaulted me. They had starved me. And now they had imprisoned me. Every single thing that happened tonight was another charge on the indictment. Every laugh was another year added to their sentence. Tyrell thought he was a big man tonight. He thought he was the king of the castle, but he had just locked himself in a cage with a monster he didn't even know existed. I reached into my slipper and checked the tracker. It was still there, safe. I checked the vial of antidote in my pocket. Safe. I wasn't a prisoner. I was an undercover operative gathering the final pieces of intelligence. I leaned my head against the cold wall and waited. The cold helped. It sharpened my focus. It froze my heart so that no warmth or mercy could ever enter it again. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them drink. Tomorrow, the bill comes due, and I am the one collecting. The darkness in the storage room was absolute. It was a physical weight pressing against my eyes, blinding me completely. The air was frigid, biting through the thin fabric of my pajamas and chilling the sweat that had dried on my skin. I sat on the concrete floor, my back pressed against the rough cinder blocks, hugging my knees to my chest to conserve body heat. The smell of bleach and old dust was suffocating, but it kept me alert. It kept me sharp. Time seemed to warp in the blackness. I counted the seconds in my head, trying to gauge how long I had been locked away. An hour, maybe 2. The raucous noise of the party had died down long ago. The bass-heavy music had stopped. The shouting and the laughter of the parasites Tyrell called friends had faded, leaving a silence that was far more terrifying. Silence meant the guests were gone. Silence meant we were alone. Silence meant the witnesses had left the building, and the stage was set for the final act. I shifted my weight, trying to ease the ache in my hip where I had fallen earlier. My hand throbbed where the boiling water had scalded it, but I welcomed the pain. It was a reminder of why I was here. It was a reminder of the woman who held the kettle and the son who watched. Suddenly, voices broke the silence. They were muffled at first, vibrating through the door, but they were getting closer. I held my breath, leaning my ear against the cold wood of the door frame. It was them, Tyrell and Skylar. They were standing right outside in the laundry room that served as the antechamber to my prison cell. I heard the distinctive sound of a glass bottle hitting the counter, hard, probably whiskey. Tyrell needed liquid courage. "I cannot do it, Skylar." Tyrell's voice was slurred, but threaded with a panic I had never heard before. It was the high-pitched whine of a cornered animal. "We have to stop. This is going too far. Stop." Skylar's voice was ice-cold sober and sharp as a scalpel. "We are not stopping, Tyrell. We are at the finish line. The house is mortgaged. The money is spent. Do you think the Ivanov brothers are going to just let you walk away if you don't pay them back? They will break your legs first, and then they will peel your skin off." I heard Tyrell sob, a pathetic wet sound. But murder, Sky, actual murder. The fall was one thing. That could have been an accident. But this, poisoning him again, finishing him off while he is locked in a closet. This is evil. Evil, Skylar scoffed. Evil is being poor Tyrell. Evil is living in a one-bedroom apartment while your senile father sits on a gold mine he refuses to share. Evil is me having to work at a makeup counter while he has millions tucked away in offshore accounts he thinks we don't know about. My heart skipped a beat. They knew, or at least Skylar suspected. She had done her homework. She wasn't just after the house value. She smelled the real money. I don't know if I can watch him die, Tyrell whimpered. He is my dad, Skylar. He taught me to ride a bike. He was there when I graduated. Oh, save me the Hallmark moment, Skylar snapped. I heard the sharp sound of flesh hitting flesh. She had slapped him. Hard. "Pull yourself together, you coward," she hissed. "Look at you, crying like a baby. Do you want to go back to being a loser? Do you want to go back to being the guy who got fired for incompetence? Do you want to be the guy who drives a 10-year-old car? Or do you want $4 million, Tyrell? $4 million. I pressed my ear harder against the wood. The number hung in the air. 4 million. That was her estimate of the house, plus the liquid assets she thought she could access. She had put a price tag on my soul. "We take care of this tonight," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. "We give him the cocktail. He goes to sleep. His heart stops. The doctor already said he has brain trauma. We call the coroner in the morning. We cry. We bury him. And by Friday we are in Cabo sitting on a beach counting our money. It is clean, Tyrell. It is easy. But what if the police find out?" Tyrell asked, his voice trembling. "What if there is an autopsy? What if they see the arsenic?" "There won't be an autopsy," Skylar said with terrifying confidence. "I already talked to the funeral home director, the one Paul Hayes recommended. For $5,000 cash, he cremates the body immediately. No questions asked, no evidence left, just ash. Tyrell. Ash and cash." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. They had thought of everything. The cremation was the final fail-safe. If I was turned to ash, there would be no toxicology report to prove the murder. They were going to burn the evidence of their crime, and my body was the evidence. But they didn't know I was listening. They didn't know I was recording. The small device in my pocket was capturing every word, every threat, every confession. But I needed more than a recording. I needed backup. Skylar was right about one thing. Tonight was the night. They weren't going to wait for nature to take its course. They were coming in here to kill me. I moved away from the door silently. I crawled on my hands and knees to the far corner of the storage room, where the water heater sat on a raised concrete platform. The floor around it was made of loose tiles, meant to be removed for maintenance. I pried up the corner tile with my fingernails, wincing as the rough edge dug into my skin. Underneath, in the dark, hollow space between the concrete and the dirt, lay my lifeline. It wasn't a standard phone. It was a satellite communicator, a small, rugged device Jameson had given me weeks ago when I first suspected they might cut the landlines and block the cell signals. It didn't rely on local towers. It punched a signal straight up to the sky. I pressed the power button. The small screen glowed with a faint green light, illuminating my face in the darkness. It blinked, searching for a signal. 1 bar, 2 bars, connected. I didn't need to type a message. We had prearranged the code. I pressed the red emergency button on the side of the device and held it down for 3 seconds. Code red. It meant imminent threat to life. It meant the endgame had begun. It meant Jameson's security team and the police contacts we had lined up were to move into position immediately. They wouldn't raid the house yet. They would set up a perimeter. They would have eyes on every exit. They would be ready to storm in the second I gave the final signal, or if my biometrics stopped transmitting. I watched the screen. Message sent. Delivered. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I was not alone in this dark closet. I had an army outside. I slipped the device back into the hole and replaced the tile, carefully sweeping dust over the cracks to hide the disturbance. I crawled back to my spot against the wall and assumed the position of the defeated, broken old man. Outside, the argument had shifted. Tyrell's resistance was crumbling under the weight of Skylar's dominance. "Fine," Tyrell said, his voice hollow, defeated. "Fine. Let's just get it over with. But I am not doing it alone. You have to be there." "I will do the heavy lifting," Skylar said, her tone triumphant. "I always do. You just have to hold him down if he struggles." "But he won't. He is weak. He hasn't eaten in 24 hours. He is hurt. It will be like putting a sick dog to sleep." I heard footsteps moving away from the door toward the kitchen. Then I heard sounds that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I heard the clinking of a spoon against a ceramic mug. Clink, clink, clink. It was a cheerful domestic sound, the sound of someone making tea on a rainy afternoon, the sound of comfort. But in this context, it was the sound of death being prepared. I could visualize Skylar standing at the marble counter. She was heating the milk, probably. Cyanide dissolves better in warm liquids, and the milk would mask the bitterness. She was opening the packet or the vial she had bought online, using the dark web browser I found on Tyrell's laptop. She was stirring it in, watching the white powder dissolve into the white milk, waiting for it to become invisible. Clink, clink. "That is enough." Tyrell's voice drifted in from the kitchen, nervous and erratic. "Don't put too much. It will smell." "It won't smell," Skylar assured him. "I got the good stuff, high purity. And even if it does, he won't know. His brain is mush, remember? He will drink anything we give him." I sat in the dark, my heart rate steadying into a slow, powerful rhythm. This was it. 0 hour. They were coming. They were going to walk through that door with a mug of poison and a smile. They were going to try to end my life. But they were walking into a trap. I reached into my pocket and touched the vial of antidote. I unscrewed the cap silently and took a dropper full, holding the liquid under my tongue, letting it absorb. It was a preemptive strike, a shield against the chemical weapon they were brewing. I checked the recording device one last time. It was still running. I closed my eyes and slumped against the wall, letting my mouth hang open, letting my body go limp. I had to look like I had given up. I had to look like I was already fading. I heard footsteps approaching the door again. 2 sets of footsteps, one heavy and hesitant Tyrell, one light and eager Skylar. The key scratched in the lock. The tumbler turned. The door creaked open, slicing a beam of harsh hallway light into the darkness. It blinded me for a second. I squinted up. Skylar stood there, silhouetted against the light. She was holding a steaming mug with both hands like an offering. Tyrell stood behind her, his face in shadow, his body language screaming that he wanted to be anywhere else. "Wakey, wakey," Skylar said softly, her voice dripping with mock affection. "We brought you something warm, Dad, to help you sleep." I looked at the mug. I looked at her. "Come in," I thought. "Come closer. Let's finish this." The time for hiding was over. The time for justice had arrived. And it was going to taste like warm milk and victory. The light from the hallway cut through the darkness of the storage room like a blade. It was blinding, after hours of total blackness. I squinted against the glare, my eyes watering as my pupils frantically contracted. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the harsh fluorescent light of the laundry room, was Skylar. She looked like a twisted parody of a nurse. She was holding a large ceramic mug with both hands, cradling it, as if it contained something precious instead of a lethal dose of cyanide. The steam rising from the cup curled around her face, softening her features, but it could not hide the predatory glint in her eyes. Behind her, lurking in the shadows like a specter, was Tyrell. He would not cross the threshold. He stood in the laundry room, shifting his weight from foot to foot, wringing his hands. He looked pale. He looked sick. He looked like a man who wanted the money, but did not want to see the blood. I remained slumped against the cold concrete wall, my body angled to look small and broken. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I kept my eyes unfocused, staring at a point near Skylar's knees. I had to maintain the illusion until the very last second. I had to make them feel safe. I had to make them feel powerful. Because arrogance creates blindness, and I needed them blind. Skylar stepped into the room. Her heels clicked on the concrete floor, a sharp rhythmic sound that echoed in the small space. She knelt down in front of me, not too close, just close enough to hand me the cup. The smell hit me instantly. It was warm milk and honey, sweet and comforting. But underneath it, riding on the steam, was that telltale scent, bitter almonds. It was stronger this time, much stronger. She had not been stingy. She had emptied the vial. This was not a sleep aid. This was an execution. "Here, Dad," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was meant to be soothing, but sounded like the hiss of a snake. "You must be cold in here. I brought you something warm. Drink this. It will settle your stomach. It will help you sleep." I looked at the mug. It was one of Coretta's favorites, a blue mug with a chip on the rim. The indignity of being murdered with my dead wife's favorite cup added a fresh layer of cold fury to the fire burning in my gut. I looked up at Skylar. She was smiling. It was a small, tight smile. The smile of someone who sees the finish line. The smile of someone who has already spent the inheritance. I reached out with my right hand. For months I had played the part of the trembling invalid. I had spilled soup. I had dropped pens. I had made them believe my nerves were shot, my motor control gone. But as my hand closed around the handle of the mug, the tremor vanished. I gripped the ceramic with a strength that belonged to a man 30 years younger. My hand was steady, rock steady, not a vibration, not a shake. It was the hand of a chief engineer who could hold a blueprint in a gale force wind. Skylar felt the difference. I saw her eyes widen slightly. She looked at my hand. Then she looked at my face. I dropped the slack-jawed expression. I focused my eyes. I locked my gaze onto hers with a laser intensity that pinned her to the spot. The confusion was gone. The dementia was gone. The Jeb they mocked was gone. Jeremiah Freeman was back. I held the mug halfway to my mouth and stopped. The steam wafted up between us. "Skylar," I said. My voice was not the raspy mumble of the last few weeks. It was deep, clear, and resonant. It was the voice that had commanded respect on rig decks and in boardrooms. She froze. Her breath hitched. She stared at me, mesmerized by the sudden transformation. It was like watching a corpse sit up in a coffin. "Skylar," I repeated, holding her gaze. "I have a question for you." She did not answer. She could not. She was paralyzed by the sudden shift in the power dynamic. "Did you ever love him?" I asked. "Did you ever actually love Tyrell? Or was he just a mark from the very beginning?" The question hung in the cold air of the storage room. In the hallway, I heard Tyrell stop moving. I knew he was listening. I knew he was holding his breath. This was for him as much as it was for her. I wanted him to hear the answer. I wanted him to know exactly what he had sold his father for. Skylar's shock lasted only a second. Then her face hardened. The mask of the caring daughter-in-law dissolved completely, revealing the cold, calculating creature underneath. She realized the game was up. She realized I was lucid, but she also realized it didn't matter. I was still an old man locked in a basement, and she was the one with the poison. She didn't need to pretend anymore. She stood up slowly, smoothing her jeans. She looked down at me with a sneer of pure hatred. "Love him," she scoffed. Her laugh was a short bark of amusement. "Tyrell is a loser, Jeremiah. He has always been a loser. He is weak. He is lazy. He is exactly like you, except without the money. I tolerated him. I managed him, because I knew that eventually you would die and he would be rich. But you just would not die, would you? You just kept hanging on." She leaned down, getting right in my face. Her eyes were hard as flint. "So no, I never loved him. I loved the potential of his bank account. And now, thanks to this milk, I am finally going to cash it out." She pointed at the mug in my hand. "Drink it," she hissed. "Drink it and go to hell. You can ask your wife if she loved you while you were down there. The mention of Coretta was the trigger. It was the final permission I needed. Any lingering doubt, any hesitation about destroying them vanished. She had desecrated my home, my son, and now my wife's memory. I nodded slowly. "Fair enough," I said. I lifted the mug to my lips. I knew the antidote I had taken earlier would neutralize the cyanide in my stomach, but only for a short time, and only up to a certain dosage. I had to be careful. I couldn't drink the whole thing. I needed to take enough to be convincing, but not enough to overwhelm the chelating agent. I took a sip, a large swallow. The taste was foul. The sweetness of the milk and honey clashed violently with the chemical bitterness of the poison. It tasted like burning rubber and old almonds. It triggered an immediate gag reflex, but I forced it down. I felt the liquid hit my stomach. I felt a sudden flash of heat in my gut as the chemicals reacted. I dropped the mug. I didn't just let it fall. I threw it spasmodically, as if my muscles had suddenly misfired. The mug hit the concrete floor and shattered, exploding into shards of blue ceramic and a splash of white liquid. The performance began. I let out a choked, gasping sound. I grabbed my throat with both hands, digging my fingers into my skin. I threw my head back, my eyes rolling up into my head, until only the whites were showing. I threw myself sideways, crashing into the shelves. Cleaning supplies rained down on me. Bottles of bleach and detergent clattered to the floor, adding to the chaos. I hit the ground hard, thrashing my legs, kicking out at the air. Cyanide poisoning is not peaceful. It is a deprivation of oxygen on a cellular level. It causes convulsions, foaming at the mouth, and cardiac arrest. I knew the symptoms. I mimicked them perfectly. I arched my back, my body rigid. I made a gurgling sound deep in my throat. I had kept a small capsule of baking soda and vinegar in my cheek, a trick I learned from a movie, and I bit down on it now. Foam, white and frothy, bubbled past my lips, running down my chin, mixing with the spilled milk on the floor. I convulsed violently one last time, my heels drumming a frantic rhythm on the concrete. Then I stopped. I let my body go completely limp. I let the air rush out of my lungs in a long, rattling exhale. The death rattle. I had heard it before in hospitals. I knew how it sounded. I lay there, amidst the broken ceramic and the spilled poison, motionless. My eyes were half open, staring unseeing at the wall. I held my breath. I had practiced this. I could hold my breath for 2 minutes easily. I relaxed every muscle, forcing my heart rate to slow down, a meditative technique I used to use during high-stress engineering crises. Silence fell over the room. For 10 seconds there was no sound but the humming of the refrigerator upstairs. Then I heard footsteps, hesitant, slow. "Is he Tyrell?" His voice came from the doorway, trembling. "Is he dead?" Skylar walked over to me. She didn't hesitate. She kicked my leg gently at first, then harder. I didn't react. My body moved with the impact like a sack of wet sand. "He is not moving," she said. She knelt down beside me. I could feel her body heat. I could smell the almonds on her clothes from where she had prepared the mix. She reached out and touched my neck. Her fingers were cold. She pressed them against my carotid artery. This was the critical moment. If she felt a strong pulse, the game was over. She would know. She would grab a pillow and smother me. But I was holding my breath. My heart rate had dropped. And Skylar was not a doctor. She was adrenaline-fueled, anxious, and looking for confirmation of what she wanted to believe. She wasn't feeling for a pulse carefully. She was doing a cursory check, her own hand, shaking with the enormity of what she had done. She pressed for 2 seconds, 3. I lay still, a statue in pajamas. She pulled her hand back as if burned. "He is gone," she whispered. Her voice rose in pitch, vibrating with a sick kind of excitement. "No pulse. He is gone, Tyrell. We did it." She stood up and turned to the door. Tyrell stepped into the room. He looked at my body. He looked at the foam on my lips. He looked at the shattered mug. He didn't look relieved. He looked terrified. He looked like a man who had just realized he could never go back. "He is really dead?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Dead as a doornail," Skylar said. She laughed, a high manic sound that bounced off the concrete walls. "Oh my God, it worked. It actually worked. We are rich, Tyrell. We are free." She grabbed Tyrell by the shoulders and shook him. "Stop staring at him," she commanded. "We have work to do. We have a timeline." Tyrell couldn't take his eyes off me. I killed my dad," he mumbled. You didn't kill anyone, Skylar corrected him sharply. He had a seizure. He had a heart attack. It was natural causes. Remember the script. Now pull yourself together. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. I'm calling the guy, she said. The cleaner. He said he could be here in an hour with the van. We need to get him bagged and ready. She dialed a number. Hey, she said into the phone, her voice shifting instantly to a professional tone. It is Skylar. Yeah, the situation has resolved. We need a pickup. ASAP. Yes, cash. 5,000 like we discussed. The address is 42 Maple Drive. Come to the back door. She hung up. Okay, she said, turning to Tyrell. Go get the cash from the safe. The guy will be here in 45 minutes. We need to clean this up. She gestured to the mess on the floor. Get some towels, Tyrell. Wipe up the milk. Pick up the glass. Make it look like he just fell asleep. I don't want the cleaner asking questions about why there is broken ceramic everywhere. Tyrell nodded numbly. He turned and walked out of the room like a zombie. Skylar looked down at me one last time. Goodbye, Jeremiah, she whispered. You should have just signed the papers when I asked nicely. She turned and followed Tyrell, leaving the door open. I lay there in the puddle of poison, listening to them scramble upstairs. I heard Tyrell opening the safe that I knew was empty, because he had already stolen the gold. I heard him cursing when he realized he was short on cash. I heard Skylar yelling at him to check his other hiding spots. They were panicking. They were rushing. I waited until I was sure they were on the second floor. Then I let out my breath in a long, silent exhale. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with air that tasted of bleach and victory. I was alive. The antidote had worked. The performance had worked. They thought I was meat waiting for the butcher. But the butcher wasn't coming. The cleaner, she called, wasn't coming. Paul Hayes, the forger and fixer who recommended the funeral home, was in FBI custody. The number she called was being routed directly to a federal wiretap. The van that would arrive in 45 minutes wouldn't be a hearse. It would be a SWAT van. I had 45 minutes. 45 minutes to get into position. 45 minutes to set the stage for the resurrection. I sat up slowly, wiping the foam from my mouth. My stomach cramped, a sharp reminder that poison is still poison. But I pushed the pain down. I stood up. I looked at the door. It is time, I thought. I walked out of the storage room, moving silently through the shadows of my own home. I was a ghost now, and ghosts are very hard to kill. The morning sun streamed through the living room windows, illuminating a scene that was both macabre and absurd. My house had been transformed into a makeshift funeral parlor. Tyrell and Skylar had moved fast. They had called the private cremation service at dawn, claiming that I had passed away peacefully in my sleep, and that, per my wishes, I wanted a quick home wake followed by immediate cremation. They didn't want an autopsy. They didn't want a medical examiner looking at my blood. They wanted me turned to ash before anyone could ask questions. I watched from the shadows of the hallway closet, where I had been hiding since escaping the storage room the night before. I had spent the last 8 hours cramped and cold, listening to them frantically clean the house, staging the scene of a natural death. They had even placed a pillow under the head of the body, which was actually just a bundle of blankets and old clothes arranged on the sofa to look like a covered corpse. They were waiting for the cremation van to arrive to do the official removal, but first they had to perform for the few relatives they couldn't avoid inviting. A handful of distant cousins and my late wife's sister, Aunt Clara, sat in the living room sipping coffee and speaking in hushed tones. They looked uncomfortable. The haste of the arrangements had raised eyebrows, but Skylar had spun a tale about it being my final request, to keep things simple and private. Tyrell was putting on the performance of his life. He was sitting in the armchair, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with fake sobs. I can't believe he is gone, he wailed loudly enough for everyone to hear. It was so sudden. He was just talking to us last night. Skylar stood next to him, wearing a black dress and oversized sunglasses that hid her eyes, but couldn't hide the tension in her jaw. She patted Tyrell's shoulder mechanically, her gaze darting to the window every few seconds, checking for the van. He is at peace now, Ty, she said, her voice thick with false sympathy. He is with Coretta. It is what he wanted. Aunt Clara wiped a tear. He looked so frail lately, she murmured. I suppose it was his time, but it seems so fast. Shouldn't we wait for an autopsy just to be sure? Tyrell's head snapped up. No, he said too quickly. I mean, Dad hated doctors. He hated hospitals. He wouldn't want them cutting him open. We have to respect his dignity. Skylar nodded vigorously. Exactly. Dignity. That is what matters. I watched them, my hands clenched into fists. Dignity. They talked about dignity while planning to burn my body to hide evidence of murder. The audacity was breathtaking. A white van pulled into the driveway. It wasn't a standard hearse. It was an unmarked cargo van. This was the cleaner service Skylar had hired, the one Paul Hayes had recommended. What they didn't know was that the driver wasn't a criminal. He was an undercover agent working with Jameson. The doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the house like a gavel strike. "I will get it," Skylar said, rushing to the door. She opened it, and two men in dark suits stepped in, carrying a black body bag and a stretcher. They looked professional, solemn. "We are here for Mr. Freeman," one of them said. "Yes, he is right here," Skylar said, gesturing to the bundle on the sofa. "Please be careful. We want to get this over with quickly." The men approached the sofa. Aunt Clara stood up, looking distressed. "Can we see him one last time?" she asked, "just to say goodbye." Panic flashed across Tyrell's face. "No, Aunt Clara," he said, jumping up and blocking her path. "You don't want to see him. He doesn't look like himself. The end was difficult. Remember him as he was." Clara hesitated but nodded, sitting back down. The men lifted the bundle onto the stretcher. They didn't open it. They didn't check for a pulse. They just strapped it down. "Okay," Skylar said, her voice trembling with relief. Take him. Take him now." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. The payment. $5,000 cash, scraped together from pawned items and emergency loans. She handed it to the driver. "Here," she whispered. "Thank you for being so prompt." The driver took the envelope and nodded. "Just doing our job, ma'am." They started to wheel the stretcher toward the door. Tyrell let out a fresh wail of grief, burying his face in his hands again. The relatives bowed their heads. It was the perfect crime, the perfect cover-up, except for one thing. The sound of sirens cut through the morning air. Not one siren, many. A chorus of wails that grew louder and louder, approaching from all directions. Tyrell froze. Skylar froze. "What is that?" she asked, her voice high and tight. The sirens stopped abruptly right outside the house. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, painting the living room in a chaotic strobe. Tyrell ran to the window. "Police," he gasped. "There are like 5 cars. Skylar, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she hissed. "Maybe it is a mistake. Maybe they are here for the neighbors." But then the front door, which the cremation team had left open, was filled with uniformed officers. They didn't draw weapons, but they stood with a commanding presence, blocking the exit. "Nobody leave," a sergeant announced, stepping into the room. Tyrell looked like he was about to vomit. Skylar took a step back, clutching her purse. "Officer, is there a problem?" she asked, trying to summon her arrogance. "We are in the middle of a funeral here. My father-in-law just passed away." "We know," the sergeant said, his face unreadable. "We received a report of a homicide." "Homicide?" Tyrell squeaked. No, officer. It was natural causes. He was old. He had dementia. Ask anyone." "That is funny," the sergeant said, "because the victim seems to disagree." Tyrell frowned, confused. "The victim is dead." He pointed to the stretcher. "Is he?" A voice boomed from the back of the house. Every head in the room turned. The door to the hallway, the one leading to the kitchen and the back entrance, swung open. I stepped out. I wasn't wearing pajamas. I wasn't wearing the stained clothes of a victim. I was wearing my best Sunday suit, a charcoal gray 3-piece that I had tailored in London years ago. My shoes were polished. My tie was straight. I stood tall, my spine straight, my shoulders back. The limp was gone. The tremor was gone. I walked into the living room with the stride of a man who owns the ground he walks on. Gasps filled the room. Aunt Clara screamed, clutching her chest. The cousins jumped up, knocking over their chairs. But the reaction from Tyrell and Skylar was the most satisfying. Tyrell screamed. It was a high-pitched, primal sound of pure terror. He scrambled backward, tripping over the coffee table and falling onto the rug, scuttling away from me like a crab. "Ghost!" he shrieked. "Ghost!" Skylar dropped her phone. It hit the hardwood floor with a crack. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes were wide, fixed on me as if I were a monster from a nightmare. Her skin turned a sickly shade of gray. "Hello, son," I said, my voice calm and cold. "Hello, Skylar." You are dead," Tyrell stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I saw you die. You drank the milk. You stopped breathing." I saw the confusion ripple through the room as the relatives processed his words. He saw me die. He knew. "I didn't drink the milk, Tyrell," I said, walking closer. "And I didn't stop breathing. I just stopped pretending." I stopped in the center of the room. I looked at the stretcher where the bundle of laundry lay. "Nice funeral," I said. "A bit cheap, though, don't you think? No flowers, no music, just a cash payoff to a van driver." "Jeremiah," Aunt Clara whispered, "you are alive." "I am, Clara," I said, smiling at her gently. "Very much alive, despite their best efforts." I turned back to Tyrell and Skylar. They were backed into a corner, now trapped between me and the police. "What is going on?" Skylar whispered, her voice trembling. "This isn't real. This is a trick." "It is a trick," I agreed. "The best trick I ever pulled. I made you believe you had won. I made you believe I was a helpless, senile old man, and you fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small microphone. I tapped it. "Is this on?" I asked. The sound echoed slightly, amplified by a speaker system Jameson's team had set up outside. "Good, because I want everyone to hear this." I looked at Tyrell. "You wanted the house, son. You wanted the money. You wanted to erase me. Well, here I am, and I have brought receipts." I signaled to the sergeant. "Officer, if you would be so kind." The sergeant nodded. He stepped aside, revealing a large, flat-screen TV that had been wheeled into the entryway by Jameson's team moments before I entered. Jameson himself stepped forward, holding a remote. "Shall we watch some home movies?" he asked. He pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It showed the kitchen. The angle was from a hidden camera installed in the smoke detector weeks ago. It showed Skylar pouring the white powder into the milk. It showed her stirring it. It showed Tyrell standing there watching nervously. "Don't put too much." Tyrell's voice came from the TV, clear as day. "It will smell." "It won't smell," Skylar's voice replied. "He will drink anything." The room erupted. Aunt Clara gasped, covering her mouth. The cousins muttered angrily. "That is a lie," Skylar screamed, lunging toward the TV. "That is fake, deep fake, AI. You made that up." "Sit down," the sergeant barked, stepping in front of her. The video continued. It showed the scene in the storage room. It showed me convulsing. It showed Skylar checking my pulse and smiling. "He is gone," she said on screen. "We did it." The video ended, frozen on Skylar's triumphant face. Skylar stood in the living room, shaking her head frantically. "No, no, no," she chanted. "This isn't fair. You tricked us. You entrapped us." "Entrapment implies I forced you to do it," Jameson said coolly. "All Mr. Freeman did was give you the opportunity. You provided the poison. You provided the intent." Tyrell looked at me. He was crying now, real tears of fear. "Dad," he sobbed. "I didn't want to. She made me. She said we had to. I am sorry, Dad. Please, tell them it was a joke. Tell them it was a test." "A test," I repeated. "Yes, Tyrell, it was a test, and you failed." I walked up to him. I looked down at the man I had raised. "I gave you everything," I said softly. "I gave you a home. I gave you love. I gave you chances, and you sold me for $50,000 and a trip to Cabo." "I didn't mean it," he pleaded, grabbing my pant leg. "Get off me," I said, kicking his hand away. I looked at Skylar. She wasn't crying. She was glaring at me with pure venom. She knew it was over, but she wasn't going to beg. "You old bastard," she spat. "You ruin everything. You should have just died." "Maybe," I said, "but then I would have missed the look on your face right now." I turned to the sergeant. "They are all yours, officer." The police moved in. Handcuffs clicked. The sound was sharp and final. Tyrell screamed as they hauled him up. "No, no, don't touch me. Dad, help me." Skylar fought. She kicked and scratched, screaming obscenities until they forced her into the back of a squad car. I watched them go. I watched my son being dragged out of the house he grew up in. I watched the daughter-in-law who poisoned me being shoved into a cage. And I felt nothing. The grief was gone. The anger was gone. There was only a cold, hollow silence. The relatives stared at me, shocked and silent. I turned to them. "The funeral is canceled," I announced, "but the wake is still on. There is coffee in the kitchen, and cake." I paused, remembering the birthday cake. "Actually," I said, "skip the cake." I walked past them out the front door. The sun was shining, the birds were singing. I was alive. I was alone, but I was free. The nightmare was over. Now the reckoning could begin. The flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace hummed to life. It was a 65-inch portal into the ugly truth that had been festering under my roof for years. The room was silent save for the whir of the cooling fan on the TV and the heavy, terrified breathing of my son and his wife. The police officers stood along the walls, their hands resting near their belts, watching the scene with the detached professionalism of men who have seen everything. Aunt Clara and the cousins were frozen in their chairs, their eyes wide, their mouths hanging open. They looked like statues in a museum of horror. I held the remote in my hand. It felt like a detonator. In a way, it was. I was about to blow up the last remnants of my family. I pressed play. The image on the screen was crisp and clear. The hidden camera I had installed in the kitchen smoke detector provided a perfect bird's-eye view of the island counter. The timestamp in the corner read 11:42 p.m. the previous night. Skylar appeared on screen. She was wearing her apron. She looked efficient. She looked calm. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. The resolution was high enough that everyone in the room could see the white powder inside. A collective gasp rippled through the living room. Aunt Clara brought a trembling hand to her mouth. Skylar poured the powder into the mug of warm milk. She stirred it. Her face was a mask of concentration, not unlike someone baking a cake. It was the banality of it that was so chilling. She was preparing a lethal dose of cyanide with the same casual energy one might use to make instant coffee. Then Tyrell walked into the frame. He stood there watching her. He didn't stop her. He didn't ask what she was doing. He just leaned against the counter, wringing his hands, looking nervous but complicit. The audio kicked in. It was crystal clear. "Don't put too much." Tyrell's voice echoed from the speakers, filling the living room with his guilt. "It will smell." "It won't smell." Skylar's voice replied, sharp and dismissive. "He will drink anything. He is a vegetable, remember?" I paused the video. The freeze frame showed Skylar mid-stir, and Tyrell looking at the floor. I looked at my son. He was staring at the screen, his face the color of old ash. He was shaking his head slowly, back and forth, a pendulum of denial. "That is not me," he whispered. That is manipulated." "It is you, Tyrell," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "And we are just getting started." I pressed play again. The video cut to the basement storage room. The camera angle was low, hidden behind a box of winter coats. It showed me convulsing on the floor, foaming at the mouth. It showed Skylar standing over me, watching me die, or so she thought. It showed her checking my pulse. "He is gone," she said on the screen. "We did it." Then came the laughter. Skylar's high, manic laugh. Tyrell's nervous, relieved chuckle. I looked at the relatives. Their faces were masks of revulsion. They were looking at Tyrell and Skylar, not as family members, but as monsters. They were seeing the faces of murderers. But I wasn't done. The murder plot was bad enough, but I needed to destroy Tyrell completely. I needed to break the bond between the conspirators. I needed him to see exactly who he had sold his soul for. I pressed a button on the remote, switching the input to a slideshow Jameson had prepared. "Now," I said, my voice hardening, "let us look at the motivation. Why were you so desperate, Tyrell? Why did you need the money so fast?" A spreadsheet appeared on the screen. It was a list of Tyrell's debts, gambling sites, loan sharks, credit cards. The total was over $150,000. "You were drowning," I said. "And instead of coming to me, instead of asking your father for help, you decided to kill me." Tyrell looked down at his shoes. He was crying silently. "But you weren't the only one with secrets," I continued. I clicked the remote. The screen changed. It was a series of screenshots, text messages. They were from Skylar's phone, the one I had hacked in the basement. The contact name at the top was Real Estate Chad. The first message read, "He is so stupid, babe. He thinks we are going to invest the money. As soon as the wire hits, I am filing for divorce." The room went deadly silent. Even the police officers seemed to lean in. Tyrell's head snapped up. He squinted at the screen, reading the words. His lips moved silently, mouthing them. He is so stupid. Filing for divorce. I clicked again. Another message. I cannot wait to leave him. He is weak, just like his father. We will take the money and go to Cabo. Just you and me. Tyrell can rot in jail for all I care. I clicked again. A photo. Skylar and a man I recognized as the real estate agent who had been appraising the house. They were in a hotel room. They were intimate. They were laughing. I looked at Tyrell. The transformation was terrifying. The fear in his eyes vanished, replaced by a dawn of comprehension that was painful to watch. He turned his head slowly toward Skylar. Skylar was staring at the screen, her mouth agape. She had been arrogant. She had been defiant. But now she was exposed. Her exit strategy, her golden parachute, was broadcast in 4K resolution. You, Tyrell's voice was a low growl. It didn't sound like him. It sounded like a wounded animal. Skylar turned to him, panic finally setting in. Ty, baby, that is not real, she stammered, reaching out a hand. He made it up. He is trying to divide us. You know how he is. Divide us, Tyrell shouted. His voice cracked. It is your phone number, Skylar. I know your phone number. Real estate Chad, the guy you said was helping us with the zoning laws. It is out of context, she shrieked, backing away. Out of context, Tyrell roared. You said I was weak. You said you were going to leave me. He took a step toward her. His hands were clenched into fists. His face was contorted with a rage that eclipsed his fear of the police. I killed for you, he screamed. I poisoned my own father for you. I sold my soul for you. And you were going to take the money and run off with a real estate agent. Ty, listen to me, Skylar pleaded, backing into the fireplace mantel. You made me do it, Tyrell yelled, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. You told me it was for our future. You told me we were a team. We are a team, Skylar cried. Liar, Tyrell screamed. He lunged. It happened so fast the police barely had time to react. Tyrell threw himself at Skylar, tackling her to the ground. They crashed into the coffee table, sending the fake funeral flower arrangements flying. He got his hands around her neck. You used me, he screamed, squeezing. You made me a murderer, and you were laughing at me. Skylar clawed at his face, her nails digging red furrows into his cheeks. She gasped for air, her legs kicking wildly. Get off me, you loser, she choked out. Hey, break it up, the sergeant shouted, rushing forward. Two officers grabbed Tyrell by the shoulders and hauled him off her. He fought them, kicking and screaming, flailing his arms like a madman. Let me go, he howled. Let me kill her. She deserves it. She ruined everything. They slammed him against the wall, pinning him there. He slid down, sobbing, his chest heaving, his fight draining out of him, leaving only a hollow, broken shell. Skylar scrambled backward on the floor, coughing and rubbing her throat. Her dress was torn. Her hair was a mess. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with hate. This is your fault, she rasped. You old devil. You did this. I looked down at her from my position by the TV. I felt nothing. No pity. No satisfaction. Just the cold clarity of a job finished. I didn't make you cheat, Skylar, I said calmly. I didn't make you plot a murder, and I certainly didn't make you underestimate me. You did all of that on your own. I turned to the door. Mr. Jameson, I said, if you would please. Arthur Jameson stepped into the room from the hallway where he had been waiting. He carried a leather briefcase and an air of absolute authority. He walked past the sobbing Tyrell and the gasping Skylar without giving them a second glance. He stood next to me and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document with a blue cover. My name is Arthur Jameson, he announced to the room, his voice projecting clearly. I am Mr. Freeman's attorney. He looked at Tyrell, who was currently being handcuffed by the officers. Mr. Tyrell Freeman, he said, you were under the impression that you had secured a power of attorney and a quitclaim deed for this property. You believed that upon your father's death, you would inherit this estate and the liquid assets contained within. Tyrell didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, crying. I am here to inform you that the document you forced your father to sign is legally void, Jameson continued. Not only was it signed under duress, which we have on tape, but Mr. Freeman had already transferred the title of this property into a charitable remainder trust 3 years ago. He is the trustee, you are not. You never were. Skylar looked up, her eyes wide. What? She whispered. It means, Jameson said, looking at her with disdain, that this house does not belong to Jeremiah Freeman, in a way that you can inherit. It belongs to the Freeman Family Foundation. Upon his death, or upon his designation, the proceeds of this estate go to the United Negro College Fund and the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. He pulled another paper from the briefcase. Furthermore, Jameson said, as of 9 a.m. this morning, Mr. Freeman has executed a new will. It explicitly disinherits Tyrell Freeman from any and all assets, not a penny, not a stick of furniture, not a memory. He walked over to the coffee table and dropped a heavy envelope on it. And regarding the $50,000 you borrowed from the Ivanov brothers against the house, Jameson added, that loan is fraudulent. Since you did not hold the title, you committed bank fraud and theft by deception. The Ivanovs will be looking for their money. And since the house is protected by the trust, they cannot foreclose on it. They will be coming to you personally for repayment. Tyrell let out a low moan of pure despair. He knew what that meant. He knew who the Ivanovs were. You broke me, Tyrell whispered, looking at me. You really broke me, Dad. You broke yourself, son, I said. I just let you hold the hammer. Jameson turned to the police sergeant. Officer, you have the evidence of the attempted murder and the conspiracy, Jameson said. You also have Mr. Freeman's statement regarding the assault and the elder abuse. I believe you have everything you need to remove these trespassers from the premises. Trespassers. Skylar spat, struggling as an officer pulled her to her feet. I live here. Not anymore, Jameson said coldly. I have here a restraining order granted by emergency decree this morning. You are to vacate this property immediately. You are not to come within 500 feet of Mr. Freeman, and considering you are going to jail, I don't think that will be a problem. The sergeant nodded. All right, let us go, he said to his men. Get them out of here. The officers began to march them toward the door. Wait, Tyrell shouted, struggling against the cuffs. Dad, please, the Ivanovs, they will kill me. You have money, Dad, you have millions, you can pay them off. Please, don't let them kill me. I looked at my son. I saw the fear in his eyes, the genuine mortal terror. He wasn't afraid of prison. He was afraid of the loan sharks he had swindled. I could pay them. It would be a drop in the bucket for me. I could write a check and save his legs, maybe his life. It was the instinct of a father, to protect, to fix. But then, I looked at the screen where the video was paused. I saw him standing there while Skylar mixed the poison. I saw him laughing while I lay bleeding on the floor. I remembered the text messages mocking me. I walked over to him. I leaned in close so only he could hear. You wanted to be a big shot, Tyrell, I whispered. You wanted to play with the big boys. Well, big boys pay their own debts. I stepped back. Take him away, I said to the officer. No, Tyrell screamed as they dragged him out the door. Dad, no! His screams faded as they pushed him into the squad car. Skylar didn't scream. She just stared at me, her eyes burning with a cold fire until the door slammed shut, blocking her from view. The room was silent again. The relatives were staring at me with a mixture of awe and fear. I looked at Jameson. He nodded once, a small gesture of respect. It is done, he said. Yes, I said, looking around the room that had been a funeral parlor 10 minutes ago. It is done. I walked over to the window and watched the police cars pull away, lights flashing. They were taking my family away. They were taking the poison out of my life. I felt a great weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't happiness, it was relief. It was the feeling of surviving a storm. I turned back to the room. Aunt Clara was standing up, her hands clasped together. Jeremiah, she said, her voice shaking. What happens now? Now, I said, straightening my tie. Now we clean up this mess. I looked at the fake body on the couch. And someone, please get that laundry off my sofa. I walked toward the kitchen. I needed a drink. Not warm milk, not soup. I needed a glass of my best scotch. The bottle I had hidden in the library. The one Tyrell never found. I was 69 years old. I had no wife. I had no son. But I had my life. I had my dignity. And for the first time in a long time, I had a future that was entirely my own. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest noise in the room. It was a mechanical, cold sound that signaled the end of one life and the beginning of a nightmare for my son and his wife. The police sergeant did not use excessive force, but he was not gentle either. He pulled Tyrell's arms behind his back with the efficiency of a man who dealt with criminals every day. And that is what my son was now. A criminal, a conspirator, a would-be killer. Skylar was already cuffed. She was thrashing against the grip of a female officer, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated ugliness. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was in disarray, and her eyes were wild. It was his idea, she shrieked, her voice cracking. He made me do it, officer. He is the one with the gambling debts. He is the one who owes the Ivanovs. I just wanted to help him. I am a victim here. Tyrell looked up from his knees. The betrayal on his face was almost pitiable. You liar, he sobbed, snot running down his nose. You bought the poison. You mixed the milk. You told me we had to kill him tonight. Shut up, you coward, Skylar screamed back, spitting in his direction. You are not even a man. You could not even kill an old man, right? You ruin everything. The officers dragged them toward the door. The family members, the cousins and Aunt Clara, pressed themselves against the walls to let the procession pass. They looked at Tyrell with horror. They looked at Skylar with disgust. As they passed me, Tyrell dug his heels into the Persian rug. He fought the momentum of the officer holding him. He turned his desperate, tear-filled eyes toward me. Dad, he wailed. Dad, please, look at me. I am your son. I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had sat up with when he had the flu, the boy I had bailed out of trouble time and time again, hoping that each time would be the last. Help me, Dad, he begged. Don't let them take me. I am scared. I cannot go to prison. I will die in there. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I am sick. You can fix this. You always fix it. The plea hung in the air. It was the same plea he had used when he crashed his first car, the same plea when he failed out of college, the same plea when he got fired. Dad, fix it. The old Jeremiah, the father who loved blindly, would have cracked. He would have called a lawyer. He would have written a check. He would have taken the pain onto himself to spare his child. But that Jeremiah was dead. He died on the kitchen floor with cake on his face. I walked closer to him. The officer paused, sensing the weight of the moment. I stood inches from my son. I could smell his fear. It smelled like sweat and cheap whiskey. I leaned down. I brought my face close to his so he could see the clarity in my eyes, so he could see that there was no dementia, no confusion, only a terrible final resolve. I lowered my voice to a whisper, a sound meant only for him. I saved you for 32 years, Tyrell, I said. I saved you from your mistakes. I saved you from your laziness. I saved you from the world. He stopped crying for a second, hope flickering in his eyes. But today, I whispered, my voice hard as diamond. Today, I save myself. The hope died. It was extinguished instantly, replaced by a void of absolute despair. He slumped in the officer's grip, his legs giving out. He knew. He finally understood. The bank of fatherly forgiveness was closed. The account was overdrawn. Get him out of here, I said, straightening up. The officers hauled him through the doorway. His wails started up again, echoing down the front walk, mixing with the static of the police radios. Skylar didn't scream anymore. As they pushed her into the second squad car, she locked eyes with me through the window. She mouthed a curse. I just watched. I watched until the cars pulled away, their red and blue lights painting the neighborhood in a chaotic rhythm. Then they were gone. The silence that rushed back into the house was heavy. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. Jameson walked over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Are you all right, Jeremiah? He asked. I took a deep breath. The air in the house felt different, lighter. The poison was gone. I am fine, Arthur, I said. Better than fine. I turned to the guests. Aunt Clara was weeping softly into a handkerchief. I am sorry you had to see that, Clara, I said. She shook her head, walking over to hug me. Do not apologize, she said. You survived. Coretta would be so proud of you for standing up. That boy, he was lost a long time ago. I nodded. He was. Jameson cleared his throat. We have work to do, he said. The police will need to process the scene. They will want the original recordings. And we need to secure the house. The Ivanov brothers might come looking for their collateral. Let them come, I said. The house is empty. The locks are changed. And the police are watching it now. I looked around the living room one last time. I looked at the spot on the rug where I had fallen. I looked at the kitchen where the cake had been smashed. I am done with this place, I said. Sell it, Arthur. Sell it as is. Donate the proceeds to the charity. I don't want a single dime from this house. I don't want the memories. Jameson nodded. Consider it done. Where will you go? To a hotel for now, I said. And then, somewhere high up, somewhere with a view. I am tired of living in the dark. 1 year later. The wind at 50 stories up is different. It is cleaner. It carries the scent of the ocean even in the city. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, leaning against the glass railing, looking down at the sprawling metropolis of Atlanta. The cars below looked like toys. The people were invisible specks. The penthouse was everything my old house was not. It was modern, open, and full of light. Floor-to-ceiling windows trapped the sun. The furniture was sleek and comfortable, chosen by me, for me. There were no stairs to fall down. There were no dark basements to hide secrets in. It was a fortress of solitude and peace. I took a sip of my coffee. It was Jamaican Blue Mountain, brewed perfectly. No bitter almonds, no metallic aftertaste, just the rich, complex flavor of freedom. The glass door behind me slid open. Dr. Gupta walked out carrying a chessboard. He looked older than he did a year ago, but his smile was warm. We had become good friends over the last 12 months. We played chess every Tuesday. He was a terrible player, but a wonderful conversationalist. Your move, Jeremiah, he said, setting the board down on the outdoor table. But first the mail. He handed me a single white envelope. It had the stamp of the state correctional facility. It was from Tyrell. I held it for a moment, feeling the texture of the cheap paper. I had received a dozen of these in the last year. At first they were angry, then they were begging, then they were bargaining. I sat down and tore it open. Dear Dad, they broke my leg yesterday. 2 guys in the yard. They said it was a message from the Ivanovs. They said the interest is still accruing. I am in the infirmary. It hurts, Dad. It hurts so bad. I need money for protection. Just 5,000. Please. If I don't pay, they said they will take an eye next time. Also, I heard about Skylar. Did you hear? She got transferred to the women's unit in Classic. Her lawyer dropped her because she couldn't pay. And that guy Chad, the real estate agent, he visited her once. He told her he invested the money she had hidden, the money she stole from the house account. He said it was gone, bad crypto deal. She has nothing, Dad. She is working in the prison laundry for 12 cents an hour. We have nothing. Please, Dad, just this once. I learned my lesson. Love, Tyrell. I read the letter twice. I looked at the words. Broken leg, laundry, nothing. A year ago, reading this might have twisted a knife in my heart. Today I felt a distant, clinical detachment. It was like reading a report about a structural failure in a bridge I didn't build. Consequences were simply physics, action and reaction, cause and effect. Tyrell was in prison because he put himself there. He was in debt to the mob because he borrowed the money. Skylar was penniless because she trusted a con man, just like she tried to con me. The circle was complete. I folded the letter. I didn't put it back in the envelope. I picked up the silver lighter that sat next to the chessboard. It was a gift from Jameson when we finalized the sale of the old house. I flicked the wheel. The flame danced in the high-altitude breeze. I held the corner of the letter to the fire. The paper curled and blackened. The words turned to ash. Broken leg. Love, Tyrell. All of it consumed by the cleansing heat. I held it until the flame licked my fingertips. Then I dropped the burning remnant into the metal ashtray. I watched it burn until it was nothing but gray dust. Dr. Gupta watched me, his expression unreadable. Bad news, he asked. Old news, I replied, brushing the ash from my fingers. Just the past trying to reach the present. I turned my attention to the chessboard. I was playing white. I moved my pawn forward 2 spaces. Bold, decisive. How are you feeling, Jeremiah? Dr. Gupta asked. Really? I looked out at the skyline. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of purple and gold. I took a deep breath. My lungs filled with clean air. My heart beat a steady, strong rhythm. I was 70 years old. I was alone. But I was not lonely. I thought about the man I was a year ago. The man cowering in a kitchen covered in cake and blood. The man afraid of his own son. That man was dead. He had died in that house. The man standing on this balcony was a survivor. a victor. "I feel light, doctor," I said. "I feel like I finally put down a heavy pack I didn't know I was carrying." I looked at him and smiled. It was a genuine smile, a smile that reached my eyes. "Your move," I said. Dr. Gupta moved his knight. The game continued. The sun dipped below the horizon. The city lights came on below us, a sea of diamonds. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the wind. I was safe. I was wealthy. I was free. And for the first time in my life, I realized that the greatest luxury wasn't the penthouse or the money. It was the peace of knowing that the snakes were in the cage, and I was holding the key. I opened my eyes and looked at the board. "Checkmate in 3, I said. Dr. Gupta groaned. "You always say that." "And I am always right," I replied. The screen fades to black on my smiling face. The sound of a chess piece clicking against the board echoes in the silence. This journey taught me that blood does not guarantee loyalty. I spent years protecting a son who only saw me as a paycheck. I learned that kindness without boundaries is self-destruction. The most painful truth was realizing that the people I loved were the ones holding the knife. But I also found strength I didn't know I had. It is never too late to reclaim your life. You are not a burden. You are not disposable. If your family treats you like an ATM, close the account. Dignity is the only currency that truly matters in the end. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven your son, or did he get exactly what he deserved? See you in the next story.